Vigilante Wiz here in the 25th episode of the Culture Crime Fighters. And we're joined not just with my man Matt from Foulball Production as always, but the man, the myth, the legend himself, Clifton. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there, at least as much as one can these days.
Well, thanks for joining us, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having
really
us.
Appreciate it.
Are you in New York?
No, I'm actually in Atlanta.
Atlanta.
I'm not welcome in New York for various reasons, and also the city as I know it is. It's just no more. I'm working on a writing something up about that, about what the city used to be and what it used to mean to live there. I feel like it's really disappointing to watch because the things that would draw any person to that city, I feel like, are sort of they're confined to a very narrow spectrum of New York or of the world. Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's
the
just
world is flat now. That's
what?
The world is flat now, as they say. That has to have impacted a city like New York, where at one point that was the only place to go, or New York or LA to go somewhere. And now it's like, well, you can be anywhere and get access to a lot more things than you could in the past.
Yeah, well, it's just one of those cities where you can get out at or get up at 1 a.m. or something and get on a train, and something's going to be happening somewhere with people that you know or you don't, but you still want to go. There's a sense of adventure, a sense of freedom, just a sense of life. It invites a kind of joie de vivre that doesn't really exist in other cities, and it's just I just see no reason to move back there right now, and it's really a shame.
Interesting. That's very interesting, Clifton. I'd like to hear a bunch about that. However, as we were saying, we're new to this. All of us. It's been a year for me in Vigilante, and we're trying to just get better and get more professional. So, in that vein, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience, just in case they're not familiar with who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is Clifton Duncan. I'm what's known as a classically trained actor, which means that I studied and read all the old plays and learned how to do Shakespeare and that kind of a thing. I reached, or at least I was reaching, a point of decent success in the theater realm in New York City, starring off-Broadway and on-Broadway. And I began to break my way into television, and then the world kind of stopped. And there were a lot of things that were happening in 2020, and it just became more and more difficult for me to shut up about them, and if not impossible. And I just began speaking up on Twitter, and then I ended up going on a bunch of really cool podcasts. And now I've become sort of a voice of influence, for better or for worse. And it's very interesting. But I'm happy to meet you all, and I'm glad to be in this space, because I think this is. I really think that there are a lot of people in the industry that are insulated, or they're afraid to kind of travel in this realm. And I'm like, well, this realm is where the people are and where they're going increasingly. This is your audience speaking to you directly, and there's so many opportunities and avenues here. But I think there's just this huge. The word capture has been used a lot recently. I mean, people aren't there. There's just this one sort of way of seeing things, and it's sort of insulated from. It's the industry kind of seems insulated in a weird way from the consequences of its actions, and I'm like, no, like the people are here. They're talking to you. They're telling you what they want, and and you're deliberately not giving it to them in some cases.
And additionally, their followings, the people who are talking, the followings of those people are growing, and they're becoming more and more informed on the nature of this content, why a lot of it is so divisive, why people don't enjoy it. They're becoming unified in that rejection, and it's becoming a much more potent and powerful counter. I mean, even just place to go watch something, but I think almost counter voice or counter culture. And I think the more they underestimate that, I think the less of a chance they have of actually long-term succeeding, because it's like you see what's going on right now with like the Kevin Smith thing with the He-Man. I think that's that one. I don't think they understood how much of a negative repercussion they were going to get out of it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the people here on YouTube and on the internet in general, just having more like collective fellowships, to borrow a Gary term.
I still say community, but that's kind of a borrowed term anyway.
Yeah.
To kind of piggyback off that point with Kevin Smith, and I think this is the more interesting thing, is we're seeing the emperor has no clothes sort of thing, or the insulation of criticism, or the insulation that there could possibly be a legit counter, where you hear that the Netflix people didn't even really care about the backlash, or they called it a review bombing. Like they figure a way to make it like it's not real, and only that insulated, almost bubble like, well, this is real, even when there are metrics a lot of times to show otherwise. But I have another thought. I think part of it is just the evolution of technology and entertainment and celebrity in general. I mean, you yourself, you said you're a classically trained actor, and even you're dipping your toes in the content creation realm.
Yeah, well, I think, there's a few things to respond to there. We were talking just before we got on air, and this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, is that, I think the era of the movie star has been over for a long time. And oftentimes when you go to the movies, the franchise itself is the star, and not necessarily. I think there's a certain cutoff generation of people that, like when I was younger, it was like, oh, we're going to go see the new Will Smith movie. Oh, we're going to go see the new Denzel Washington movie. We're going to go see the new Tom Cruise movie. And now it's like, we're going to go see the Avengers. We're going to go see Lord of the Rings. We're going to go. And I think that there's a failure to respond to what I think is the reality that fame, such as it was, stardom, such as what we used to think of it as, they don't mean the same things anymore. And if you're a reasonably attractive looking woman, you can strap on some leggings and film yourself doing squats in front of a mirror, and you can get as big a following, if not more, than a Michael B. Jordan. And
yes, that's actually one of our alternate intros. Me saying the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Funny. Well,
it's like comedians that have been working at it their whole lives, like 50,000 followers. You know what I mean? It's a fraction compared to a girl who, picked it up 6 months ago. It's very different.
Well, what I was also gonna add to all of that is that there's a reason that things are so insulated now, and I've been thinking about this as well. There's this great essay that was written in 1946 by this guy named Albert Maltz, and it's called "What Shall We Ask of Writers?" And this is a very, not to get super political, but this is a very left-wing writer who's criticizing what he views as left-wing literature and drama. And he's talking about using art as a weapon, how these people that are making and producing the art view art as a weapon in terms of like a political weapon, essentially. And
in the 40s, this is
1946. He wrote this, and what he touches on as well is something I've been thinking for a long time, which is that people, I think in the industry, they're making content, or they're producing material that's meant to appeal to their peers and their colleagues, not the audience as a whole. And even as actors, even as a classically trained one who did lots of theater, you come up and you're told, well, you're supposed to. There's a lot of paradoxes in what we do. Like you're told, well, our job as actors is to serve the writer. And I've come back around and think like, no, actually, I think our job is to collaborate with the writer and the director and the producers and all the various other people involved. Our goal is to serve the audience. And I feel like that's kind of been lost. And I feel like in many ways, this kind of touches back into what we've been talking about, which is this in this era now where there's so much access, there's so much technology that now this is what I was saying before we came on air, is that the quote unquote normies, the ordinary people, are actually as much, if not more interesting than these supposed movie stars that we're supposed to fawn over. And we can see that now because we have access to both. And so it's just weird that there's never been more access to to understanding what people want, but also a never bigger desire, it seems, to run away from those very things that people want. It's very strange. But what's happening is that people are making, just to go back to what I was saying, is people are making content. They're making movies, they're making TV shows to appeal to themselves and not to the wider audience. And I think they have a very skewed understanding of what of who their audience even is and what they want. And just to go back to the Kevin Smith thing, I know I'm talking a lot, but I mean, I think the He-Man, I won't say debacle. I mean, it's only the first half of the series that's out, but the response to that and the way that property's been treated, by those that make it, we're in an era where now the audiences are becoming, if not are already, smarter than the people that are making the content that we're supposed to ingest. And I think they're mad at us for that. But
I would say there are some smarter. Like if you look at some of the critics, like the critical drinkers of the world, or the maulers, who can break down this stuff to the molecule and come up with better things than the writers can. But
also being ahead of it, like it's like I was listening to the Real BBC yesterday. It's with Az and Gary from Nerdrotic, and Mahler happened to be there, and Critical Drinker. They all happened to be there, and that was something Az said about, like, it's almost like we know exactly where you're going to go with it before you even do it, because we pay attention to this stuff. Like, we are genuinely fans and we really do care. And then, like, when they think that they're like, oh, this is that clever thing, it's like, no, you dope. First of all, you got that playbook from someone else. And it's like, we've seen that playbook play out in our video games, in our movies, and we are really paying attention to this stuff. And you think you're so clever, and we're ahead of you. And it's like, it's this whole thing where they can't, that's not how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be in charge. They're supposed to be, calling the plays, running the show. And when that's not the way it's going, I think it's really throwing a monkey wrench into the whole system.
Well, there's also this element of, again, it kind of is underneath the umbrella of this anti-audience attitude, is that understanding that people who are fans of things are fans because they love those things. And I think fandoms are open to change, and they're open to doing like new things if the property in question, the franchise in question, is treated with respect. I think that I don't think there's any He-Man fans out there. I say this as someone who used to watch the show when I was little. I've shed tears over He-Man. But I don't think anybody would be averse to watching a story about Teela, as long as it was made human and did not disrespect Adam and the He-Man character. I think a lot of people would have been like, "Oh, cool! Let's see Teela rise up and see how she deals with adversity if Adam is somehow sidelined." I think people want to see stories that are rooted in deep, dare I say, classic human motivations. And I've been reading about these kinds of things a lot. I mean, I'm reading a lot of Aristotle lately. And that he has a book called The Poetics. And in the Poetics, it's his treatise to try and just define, at least, in ancient Greek terms, just various genres of drama. And, he calls the playwrights poets. He talks about tragedians and comedians, and just these basic classic tenets where if you're telling a tragedy, the people in that tragedy are generally better than we are as human beings. If you're talking about a comedy, you're making a comedy, the people tend to be worse people than we are as human beings. There's something that is just that even the Greeks had figured out a long time ago. Dead white men they may be. I mean, I don't know how white we want to get here, but they had something to say, and they were able to grasp a lot of things back at a time when they were actually able to tell the truth, in many ways. And there's just the focus on eliciting feelings from an audience and crafting a story in order to get a response from the audience. It's very audience focused. And I feel like if you approach properties like He-Man from an audience first perspective, and you observe good rules of storytelling, then they'll accept just about anything you throw at them. Just respect the property and respect the craft, and that's all people want. And when they're telling you, like you said before, when they're telling you that they don't like it, don't call them racists and Nazis. Maybe listen to what they're saying. It makes me so sick. I see it over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't like it, they're right. You made it for the audience. Now, it may be a smaller contingent, it may not be, but it's like your idea is to satisfy the largest chunk of the audience as possible. I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, we're making entertainment. So it's like if your audience is collectively, or a large group of them are collectively saying, I don't like this. This isn't for me. This isn't what I respect about it. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think you have to just be like, well, yes, okay, if they say it. But I think you should listen to what they're saying, and if they have a point, like I think it's such a bigger problem though, because it's not just it. That's implied. Like, you're an actor. I was an actor for about 15 years. I spent some time in New York and some time in LA, and it's like, ultimately, like, I always wanted to have, like, I always wanted, you did great. Like, I always wanted compliments and praise. Like, you did very well. You nailed it. Like, it told the story. Like, it was moving. It was doing the thing, right? Like, I wanted that, but I wanted it from the audience. Like, I wanted the audience to, have been entertained and enjoyed what I put out there. Like, that was intrinsic. So it's like this whole thing that if I put out a performance, if I did something and then, 8 of the 10 people or 50% of the people were just like, that's not even close to what I was hoping this was going to be. The idea to attack them is insanity to me.
Yeah. Real quick before we keep going, I have to say this because the benefactor of the Culture Crime Fires and the show, Ogre Squasher 101, tipped $101.71. Holy smokes, man. Thank you again. I can't believe you do this as often as you do. Thank you for the incredible super chat. And thank you to the chat. I know we just started in the conversation. You guys are killing it in the chat. I'm noticing a lot of what you're saying. Actually, there's one point I saw, and shout out to Rough Girl. She's one of the newer people to the channel. And where the hell is you guys are not going crazy because of Ogre Squasher.
Yeah, and also, to that Ogre Squasher thing, I wanted to say, once again, Ogre Squasher, thank you very much for your spectacularly generous charity contribution on Friday, where you donated $1,000 to my friend's GoFundMe for her health issues. Thank you so much. She was incredibly grateful. I transferred all the money just yesterday. In fact, from everyone's contributions last week, and the extra one from the unbelievable Ogre Squasher. So I wanted to just formally say thank you now that I know you're here, and you guys are incredible.
Yes. Thank you, Ogre Squasher. Thank you, anyone who contributed last week where we actually had Neurotic on, and it all aligned to, I think, did we meet her goal?
Oh, yeah, we did. Yep.
Cool.
We surpassed it even.
Awesome. That's dope. So this message is, to me, an interesting one, because I know in general you brought up, well, I'm saying too many things at once. You had said something about storytelling as well, because there's a woke thing, there's a indoctrinate, whatever you want to call it, and then there's just a lack of basic writing for the human condition. Rough Girl, who I'm assuming is a girl, I don't want to assume your gender, but says Hollywood keeps saying they're for women, but they're making all the men or the women look like men or biatches. And I mean, I've talked about, they don't even make chick flicks anymore. Like they don't produce them. Yet we have Macho Man Abby Savage, we have Tila hopping on the Anavar or whatever, and we have all these, really uber masculine females. And these really bitchy masculine females. I've talked about, like, I can't remember the last time I saw a black woman that was in shape and happy on television. There's always a 300-pound angry black woman, and that's frustrating to me personally. Not always, but you just see that
so often. Though, it also comes with like a self-righteousness too. It's a kind of a character where you just kind of keep at arm's length because it's intense.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure what I'm necessarily. I guess it's like they're not necessarily even hitting the thing they're trying to do. If they're trying,
they say they're trying to do.
They're trying to do. Because sometimes I think that they are doing what they're trying to do, and it's the opposite of whatever they say. But like that's the interesting point. Okay, you guys don't like women, and then no women go see Birds of Prey. And Ogre Squasher, thank you again, because apparently you tipped Matt the same tip.
Yeah,
again.
Ogre Squasher, you are unbelievable, man. Thank you so very much. Another $100. I mean, blown away, dude. Blown away. You're the coolest. You are the coolest, bro.
He's the benefactor of the show. So I know we've talked a little bit, but what are your thoughts, Clifton, about Hollywood missing their intended mark as well as angering whatever franchise they're going after? The fan base, I should say.
Well, I'm kind of thinking about Rough Girl's comment about women as well. I think, just to go back a little bit, I mean, I think that there's a couple of issues at play there. Again, one is, we go back to this term that Albert Maltz said, which is art as a weapon. In this case, it's a socio-political weapon to remind everybody that that women are strong, as if we needed to know that. You know, I mean, you're talking about in terms of the cinema, we've had stars from Bette Davis and, you know, Katharine Hepburn who themselves were strong female presences back in the day. In the 70s, you know, we all talk about Sigourney Weaver in the Alien franchise, or we look at the incredible work that Linda Hamilton did in Terminator 2, you know, and the thing is, those films, or those characters, they weren't driven by this idea that they have to prove the women are tough. I think the difference is that a lot of the women are tough because the story requires them to be. And if they don't begin the story as tough as they end the story, then there has to be a plot motive or a story progression motive in order for those characters to gain the might that they have. When you have characters who come in and don't need any sort of development at all, I can think of a certain intergalactic franchise bought by Disney that's a prime example of this. When there's no, one. There, yeah, I know. Wonder you might. There's no journey there, and people go to, you know, we talk about stories. I mean, a story is a struggle. We want to see what happens on the other end of that struggle. And you know, as far as female characters, it's very strange because oftentimes these characters, part of the reason that we're not really into them is because it doesn't seem like they have a really struggle about them, because the author's intent is to show how strong they are, not to delineate a human being, you know, under extraordinary circumstances. That makes the story interesting. But as far as Hollywood missing out and not being in touch with the fans, again, I go back to it's just very insulated. And there's a great progressive economist and mathematician named Eric Weinstein who talks about what he calls the gated institutional narrative, or the GIN, and as well as he calls it the distributive idea suppression complex, or the DISC. And both of these things are kind of at play in Hollywood. For instance, I talk about how It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart is one of my favorite films of all time. But its creator, Frank Capra, was a conservative Republican. There are people who, there is a hostility even towards moderates and independents in the industry. So anyone who is conservative or has openly conservative views, I mean, Tim Allen and others like him are an exception. They kind of keep quiet. They don't want to rock the boat. So how many other It's a Wonderful Lives are we keeping out of Hollywood, and by extension, out of the cultural consciousness of the people of the United States or of the world, because there is this demand for ideological conformity. So on one end, there's a gatekeeping that happens where, you know, either you're gray listed or blacklisted. I mean, I'm always shocked whenever I get appointments or auditions now, just based on on my Twitter account. But on top of this, this sort of enforced echo chamber, which is ironic because it comes from people who talk about McCarthyism all the time, but then they themselves, I call them neo-McCarthyists.
Yeah, and I also like to say that, it turns out I think McCarthy had a point.
Yeah,
I
they
think
kind
he
of
was
proved them
on to
right.
something. When you look at you look at the entertainment industry and you look at the educational institutions and how much a lot of this stuff comes from Marxism and socialism and the like all this stuff. It's like, no, actually he was on to something. He might not have gone about it the right way, but he had a point.
Well, what's difficult about it is that if you're talking about like a sort of postmodern sort of deconstructionist point of view, I mean, a lot of the work that I did, especially in theater, comes from that. I think a lot of what we're seeing ideologically extends from this sort of postmodern idea of, or this sort of critical with a capital C idea of pointing out, various systems and all kinds of things in society. And that comes down into the work. And on one hand, it's kind of cool if you're a creative to say, well, I'm going to question everything and break things down. You have to be curious as an artist, and keep asking questions. But there's a point where it becomes so overboard that it becomes cynical, and it becomes the foundations of a cynical worldview. And you have people who don't know what heroism is. They don't know what true virtue is. They don't know what nobility is. That's what's so fascinating about reading these old Greek treatises, because they talk very openly about what is good and what is bad, and what's noble and what's not. And it just seems like now there's this overwhelming, pervasive spiritual kind of heaviness or emptiness. I don't know what you would call it.
I would say emptiness.
I agree.
It's something like that, where people don't know what is good anymore, or they just don't.
They don't care. There isn't a collective morality.
They want to tear everything down because but they don't have anything worthwhile to put in its place. That's what I was getting at with that. And that permeates the storytelling. And so they're not building much, and the stories don't aspire to anything. But they a lot of them seem to come from the point of view that the audience that's watching these films is bad, and that the film exists to solve some kind of societal problem. Yeah. It's like, no one goes to Marvel movies trying to solve racism.
Right. Yeah, and you're not. We just want to. You're not qualified to create the answers. You even said in the Falcon and Winter Soldier, well, what do we do? Well, I don't have the answers. Well, what the fuck are you talking about? Why are you chastising everybody?
And it's just not the forum. It's just not the forum. A Marvel movie is not the place to have these complex discussions to remind us of society's woes. It's to escape that shit. It's to have a little fun.
I'll push back because, I was thinking just before we came on the air, it's not as though these stories can be completely apolitical. I think one of the things that really impressed me about Captain America: Winter Soldier is that at its heart, there was a political debate, which is freedom versus security. And so you can weave these things into a story. You can have those politics or those points of view inform your storytelling, but you have to don't insult your audience's intelligence and tell them in a way that's satisfactory. It makes sense for Steve Rogers in that film to be a little disenfranchised and questioning, like, the world that he's growing up in. It's an interesting take for the character and the broader sense of, well, Steve Rogers is a guy who fought the Nazis. Right. So of course he would be motivated to fight. I mean, and it's such great writing because it flies into why he does not sign the Sokovia Accords in Civil War. It's like we need freedom.
But there's a strong difference. Big difference between that and trying to convince your audience to agree with you. That's a huge difference.
The point is, it's character and it's story driven, and it's organic to great art, as opposed to, again, using art as a weapon to bully the audience into doing something or believing something that they otherwise would not.
I like that. Because a lot of it is I use the term societal engineering, but I don't use it loosely. They are trying to generationally and I think that's part of the reason we don't have as many people who have a good, or as far as writers, have understanding of heroism. We've deconstructed things so long that they don't even know what a hero looks like. And there's a lot of concepts that instead of trying to entertain an audience, they're trying to acclimate an audience to a certain style of storytelling by putting it everywhere, to the point that your video games and cartoons and TV shows and big budget movies all have the same message. And I get, my thought is they're trying to wait us out. They're trying to, like, you know what, we're going to teach your kids this. We're going to do it for years and years and years. And eventually they'll be used to, every woman just being super strong, powerful Mary Sue's, and there's no consequence to their actions, or you could brainwash and kidnap a town and everyone understands you. Like that stuff they're going to acclimate to where the kids are. That's my thought, at least, and that's my thinking on that.
There's also a question of what I'm kind of piggybacking on the idea of the strong female character. You see a lot of executives say, well, I wanted to create a character, or you see actresses say, I wanted to create a character that that little girls could look up to. And I'm thinking to myself, when I was 9 or 10 years old, I mean, I wanted to be Luke Skywalker and Indiana Jones and like Ryu from Street Fighter. And but the idea of wanting to be Luke was that he was the hero and he was saving everybody and putting himself in danger, and he was fighting the bad guys. I feel like the strong female character is a role model for somebody who, and I say, capital S, capital F, capital C, as a trope as we understand it today. I feel like they're symbols of the abuse of power in a way, and it's that's not a healthy model to look up to. And like a Captain Marvel character would have been really interesting if we had seen how she overcame I guess you call it the tyranny of her mentor or her teacher, and how she learned how to believe in herself. I mean, that would have been an interesting journey and story to watch, as opposed to like, I'm just being held down by all these men, and all of a sudden I'm super powerful and I can do whatever I want. It's just, I remember Luke Skywalker's like, this dude took 3 movies in order to earn that moment of where he shows up at Jabba the Hutt's lair. And we're like, oh snap, Luke, he got his hand back. He about to whoop some ass right now. Like, you have to build up into that and earn that. Because in The Empire Strikes Back, he went through a lot. He lost his hand. He found out his dad was the most evil dude in the universe. He's having, horrific visions, and he don't know what he's doing. He went through a lot. And then when he comes in and Return of the Jedi, you're like, okay, this dude, he got a clef in his chin now. He's a man. he's about to mess some stuff up. But I didn't get that with Rey. When she mastered the Jedi mind trick in 10 minutes flat, I was like, what, man,
on the
F
fly.
this movie. I couldn't believe it. I was like, there is no path of progression for this character. She's just perfect. She knows how to work the Millennium Falcon better than Chewie and Han does. She can fix everything. And again, and what happens is, as all the fans know, is that when you begin to raise these concerns, which are totally to do with the writing of the character, not even the portrayal of the character, because a Daisy Ridley she didn't give herself that job. And she's doing what she's being directed to do and what she's been hired to do. She's a hired hand, as most actors are, unless they're producing their own material. And but you see that, and it's just like, okay, well, how is she beating Kylo Ren, who's like a trained?
That also messed me up. Really,
it just
there was only one way to go with that the other way. Like, she should have been a villain. She should have been. Oh, she's so powerful.
That would have been cool.
That's why. You know what I mean? That would have been a twist. What if she would have turned out to be the villain and Finn would have been the hero? Because they did tease that maybe he could have, but instead he was just yelling for Rey for 3 movies. But like, that's almost where they should have went, because she was so overpowered as presented, where she's just this girl on the planet, some desert planet. Okay, they're trying to do Luke, but wait, no, Luke wasn't this good at anything. Immediately.
No. What character is? And if you are, it's like, it's like what's it called? Like Conan the Barbarian. Like, if you're that good and that powerful, you had to suffer so much to get to that point. Like, that's part of your backstory, and that you're dealing with the trauma of being this good because of how hard it was to get to that point. Like some sort of human struggle. She had absolutely none whatsoever.
I mean, even Thor, he's a god, but he has to prove himself. He has to keep proving himself worthy to keep on lifting Mjolnir.
Right.
And some of the best Thor stories I've seen, who's a character I didn't think that I didn't expect to like, but when I started reading the older books, obviously, I really fell in love with the character, because he's not brilliant. He's not, he's not a Peter Parker or a Tony Stark, but his heart is always in the right place, and he's brash, and he can be a little reckless, but he's strong and he's heroic and he always fights to the end. But at the end of the day, he's always serving the people of Asgard, and he's always trying to do what's best for the people of Asgard. And he's worried that one day, I think it was a Jason Aaron run, it might have been a God Butcher, where he wakes up. There's a panel where he wakes up every morning and tests whether or not he can still lift Mjolnir. And I'm like, that's such a great kind of detail, because it shows that he's always worried about being worthy. That's something that's heroic. That's virtuous. That makes the character virtuous and
empathetic.
And empathetic. Yeah. He's got all these powers, but he's got all these vulnerabilities as well. And that's what audiences, that's what Marvel Studios did so brilliantly. And I made this point before to other people, is that one thing that I noticed, especially in a couple of the later DC film offerings, is that you saw the characters in their costumes a lot of times, even when they were just having mundane conversations. And I thought to myself, if it were like Saturday Super Friends or a cartoon, or JLA or whatever cartoon adaptation you wish, that works in a cartoon. What's different about the Marvel films is that you see people outside of their costumes almost more often than you see them in costume. And whenever they are in costume, it's usually in the service of an action scene. So what Marvel did is they said, we have these people who happen to have extraordinary abilities, and they happen to have these, ridiculous costumes and have all these crazy powers. And they gave us the people first, and the powers were kind of secondary in a way. That's why I think Captain America: Civil War is one of my favorites, because they have that ridiculous tarmac scene, which still gives me goosebumps. When they're like running toward each other and at increasing speed, and they start all going at it. But they knew, the Russo brothers are smart, because they knew they couldn't really top that scene, so they took the emotional stakes deeper. And that's what was so fascinating about the film, is that it didn't go for, they gave you all the spectacle, but then they went deeper and were like, oh yeah, well, look, this dude that Steve Rogers has been trying to save murdered your parents, Tony Stark, and Steve knew about it. He didn't say anything. I was like, oh snap, Steve. And I'm literally like, I'm watching this soap opera unfold, and I'm sitting there in the theater, a grown ass man, just like, oh, no, like I'm involved in it, and that's what that's just what I want, because I'm invested in who Steve Rogers is. I'm invested in who Bucky is to Steve, and I'm invested in who Tony Stark is, and what his arc is throughout this decade long.
And you're saying you didn't get that out of Birds of Prey? I don't know what to say.
I didn't see Birds of Prey.
No, I didn't either.
No one did.
Majority of the country, I didn't see it.
Yeah. Hey, Clifton, I wanted to go back to something you were saying before, and it's kind of like a question that I was kind of curious about your experience on this as an individual. So you said like how, you're not welcome in New York. Like I said, I was in New York for about 5 years, and then I moved to California. And I think my move to California, maybe like I moved in 2011. So maybe around like 2014, I think that's when I started to notice that there was this pretty significant difference in the entertainment industry, and there's kind of my community at large, where, when I was in New York, like pretty much everyone's like a liberal, left wing, like you just kind of, it's sort of assumed and presumed, but it wasn't, it didn't seem to assert itself as much into like everyday conversation or my work environments, or at least, not my acting schools really at all. Like it was just, we were always talking about the work. We were always, this, that, and the other. But then I don't know if it was California or if it was the time, but I noticed it became this sort of like clique. It became, he's right. It became this sort of like cult thing, where, and then it became very like, almost like people would talk behind your back, kind of like Mean Girls, it'd be like, if you weren't down with the program, that's why they feel like it started to get a lot more exclusive, a lot more intense, and it became the dominant characteristic of the group. Did you notice a switch like that? Did you notice that kind of pattern or change in your experiences?
No, I mean, one of my frustrations right now is that until recently, I've been able to be pretty isolated from those types of things, and I'm being told that I get irritated because I'm being told that people that look like me have been excluded from the industry, for years and years and years. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I've been working for years and years and years, more so than most people get the chance to. And yet I'm still being told that the industry hates me, or that it hates me because I'm Black. And no one seems to want to listen to any of my rebuttals. But I will say that something definitely shifted after Donald Trump was elected. Something, and it was weird because I was actually doing a show in Hartford, and even in that, when you just talk to people on the ground, I mean, this has been my contention for a long time, and on one hand, I have sympathies with people in the industry, especially. I mean, if you're a very well-known actor, you can't just go to the supermarket. You can't just have a low-key kind of a day. So your anonymity is gone. So it's harder for you to. There's just going to be a barrier there that just has to exist between you and quote unquote the public in a lot of ways. And just living a life as an actor, especially if you're busy and you're working a lot. I mean, you're going from gig to gig to gig. You're traveling. You're doing promotional material. You're reading scripts. You just don't have a lot of time to really do things. And when you get a real momentum going, I mean, that sucks up all your focus. So, and on top of that, if you're really going for the gold, you're in either Los Angeles or New York City. There's just no two ways about it. So there's multiple factors that are creating this sort of this sort of ideological bubble that we were talking about before. But I say all of that to say that in 2016 in November, I was doing a show in Connecticut, and the first person who ever told me that he was going to vote for Donald Trump was our Black barber that was like servicing the show that I was doing. And his Black friend is nodding along. His concerns were purely economic. And this guy was a son of a Jamaican farmer who had barely any education, but he knew how to do math and work hard. So he was able to build a life for himself and for his family. And his son, who is cutting my hair, has multiple businesses. And he was like, yeah, under Obama, it was hard to open a business, but now Trump, he's going to make it so we can make some money. And his boy, his Black friend, was sitting there laughing. Then I would go to the YMCA and to the gym there, and I'd say more upper middle class white guys out there, you know what they were talking about? Jobs and the economy. Then I would go to rehearsal for the show that I was in. And it was all about, Trump is a racist, and if he wins, it's going to be about racism, yada yada yada. And I can't believe where the country is going. So we're completely isolated oftentimes from these sorts of more heterodox opinions, which it was just so strange. And then I had this sort of epiphany where I said, wow, I don't think the Democrats really have any use for you as a Black person if you're actually happy with yourself and your life and you feel kind of self-actualized and self-possessed. But then after he was elected, we had a little shindig at the artistic director's house. And the artistic director, for those who don't know, I mean, it's sort of like the big boss of whatever theater you're working at. And all the adults there were just, they were sullen, they were moping around. I can't believe what's happened and what's happening to this country. And I was the only asshole walking around like, I think we're going to be fine. But it's just that if you talk to people and you see what their concerns are, which a lot of people in entertainment don't do, but they're writing for people that they never interact with. And increasingly they keep demonizing. So how can you write for a mass audience when in your mind, your buddy at Variety or the Hollywood Reporter, or whoever runs Rotten Tomatoes, they're all telling you to say one thing, and you don't want to be on the outs because you never know when your time on the carousel is going to be up, and someone else is going to step in and take your place. So everybody wants to say, what they need to say, and it's just not interesting. And I think that translates into what's being produced.
Yeah, I firmly agree. I hear there was like this distressed collective. Like I remember the exact same thing. Like I got a letter from my acting coach at the time, and he's like, I know we're all hurting right now and everyone's in this sad time, but please make sure you come to class and we can talk about it and heal together.
Yes. I'm like, dude, are you adults? What's going on?
Yeah,
you lost
that's a good question.
You lost an election, and and that happens, but I don't want to spend. I mean, it got to the point I couldn't even go to an audition. I couldn't get through 10 minutes of rehearsal, and someone was talking about, I'm trying to read for a series regular on CBS, and people are like, God, I don't know what's happening. I don't want to have to pontificate on the current status of society and public events right now, or current events right now. I'm trying to get a job. I don't care about any of this. I worry about it when I'm rich. Okay, can we just do this job?
The one I saw that always cracked me up was they would do this very noble thing. We're like, guys, let's just put this away, and then we focus on the work, and then this way we can deal with it. We can heal. And it's just like, oh my!
And it's getting worse. It's getting worse. I'll tell you. So after last year, and this is one of the reasons I began being more vocal. I kept getting these messages from theaters that I worked with, or colleagues other actors that I worked with, typically women, typically white, very left, just apologizing to me about how hard my life must be and how much pain I must be suffering because I'm a Black person.
Everybody hates Chris teacher thing.
Well, it's just this condescending attitude and idea that my life is nowhere near as good as theirs, and I've been suffering the entire time. And I would get
my next question: like, do they realize how racist they are? Because even though I'm off camera, I'm a Black dude, brother from Detroit. So
here's part of the problem, and it's an industry full of, especially talking from an actor's perspective. I mean, it's our job to be empathetic. It's our job to feel things. And when you add to that this sort of, I say oftentimes that what we're seeing from I don't even know what you would call them. I guess I would call them the social justice left, just to be as specific as maybe I can be.
Champagne socialists.
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to get away from denigrating them too much, but I'm just trying to assign some kind of label to them. But this faction of people, it's a small number of them, but they're in industries that give them vast amounts of influence. So I think they think that their ideas are more widespread and their views are more widespread and more widely accepted than perhaps they understand. But there is this component of this like social justice leftism, or maybe leftism as a whole, that has the same kind of like piousness and sanctimony as like the religious right that we used to make fun of during the Bush years. And so there's a moral and a political a moral component on top of all of this, which is like, well, I believe these things because I care more. I'm a caring person. These are the issues that I care about, to the exclusion of other issues and to the exclusion of other points of view. So you have an industry where actors, especially, the employment is very precarious. Employment is the exception, not the rule. You never know where your next job is coming from. You're expected to be compliant and say yes all the time, even when directors clearly have no idea what they're talking about, or the text is there in front of you and the writer doesn't know how to write and it's garbage, but you still have to say yes anyway. You're expected to be compliant. So you have an industry full of compliant people who have one set of views that they've never seen outside of, and
they wouldn't dare question.
Component. Say what?
Sorry, and they wouldn't dare question.
Well, because there's no need to, because they're good people. They're good people before believing in the things that they believe in. Everyone else who doesn't believe what they believe is a bad person, and they're horrible and wrong, and they don't deserve to be a part of society.
Aren't they tolerant?
Say what?
So tolerant. It's so tolerant of them to have that opinion.
Well, it's weird.
To be so exclusive.
It's
in the name of tolerance.
Well, yeah. Well, and they're all about tolerance and love, and it frustrates me because otherwise they're very, very gifted and skilled and lovely people who are very interesting and intelligent about other things, and they come from other walks of life. But when it comes to politics, it's just very narrow, and because it's very narrow, it only certain points of views are really entertained. And I think what's happened And it's happened in New York already, I think, but it's also happening on a broader scale in Hollywood, which is a way, way, way bigger wing of the entertainment industry. There's a lot more money at stake. Is that it's alienating itself. This work is alienating itself from vast numbers of people, and it's only appealing to this niche perspective, sort of bourgeois, I guess I'll say Marxist kind of worldview. And I think that most people in this country, at least, don't really share those views. But they don't know, but they're talking past each other and they just don't get it.
Yeah, no, it's you touched on something there too, and it was the thing that was really, it was perplexing to me. It was, they have this unbelievable gift of empathy. Like they could take paper, black and white, written words, and create a whole human being with a perspective and values and like concerns, and they can do all that, but they couldn't possibly conceive of why someone might vote for Trump.
Yeah, that's
they can't do it.
Been my thing. So like because I feel dehumanized by them in a number of ways, and actually even one of them is black. I mentioned Everybody Hates Chris. The TV show Everybody Hates Chris had a teacher that just assumed he was the poorest black guy and his father wasn't there. And that was the joke. But it was like, and this is like a 10, 15-year-old show. But like, as someone who's never really been a part of the Hollywood system, I tried to make music, but never really got into the system like that. Like I tend to just think that they don't have empathy, that they're all sociopaths who just want money and don't care or just want to prove how much better they are. So I guess I'm posing that question not just to Clifton, but to Matt, like off your point, like how did that happen where these people who are talented and otherwise empathetic and can understand empathy in order to act, that takes that's a skill of being able to emotionally tap into a different place than you actually are, and to present that to people. I mean, don't take for granted how incredibly rare that is. It's just why film and TV is such a big deal. But how can people who can do that be so detached from other people having a different opinion?
Because those other people are infidels and non-believers. They're apostates.
It's indoctrination.
Sinners. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting that even without religion, it could become a religion?
Well, I mean, I say this as an atheist, and one of the loneliest things to be as a black atheist, especially. Black people are Christian AF in general, and but it's just very strange. I mean, I was talking to Zuby about this for a while as well. I can't. It's tough for me to I mean, I called it cultural malaise in the past, but there is this, and it goes back to, I think, the cynicism that we were talking about earlier. There is just some kind of hole, some kind of emptiness. And I don't know, I can't think of another word to describe it other than spiritual, where there is a darkness or an emptiness, a lack of aspirational intent that is plaguing everybody. It's plaguing the arts, and it's making everything just. There's a lack of heart and a lack of soul to so much of what we're doing. And I think of this line from Hamlet all the time. It's early on in the play, where he says to Horatio, "There is more in heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy." Philosophy, in this sense, being it could be interpreted as like, the thinking, seeking wisdom. Could also be interpreted as science. But either way, it's like he's saying that there is more to life. There's more to us living than what you can understand up here in your head. And to me, that's such a grand, exciting moment to think that, wow, there's so much that I don't know, and there's so much that I can learn. And the more that I read, the more research that I do, the more I'm humbled by what I don't know. But these people who presume to create work to be consumed by millions of people, I don't know if they're that. I don't know if they're all sociopaths. There are definitely some of them that are not the greatest people. And you're also talking about an industry that tends to attract a lot of damaged people. To be quite honest with you,
I think the arts in general do that.
Yeah, well, it's a tough life to lead, and there's not a whole lot of comfort and money in it. I mean, if you become a movie star, that's the top 1 or 2% of the industry. It's a very, very rare thing to do, and even that has its own challenges and its own miseries, I guess. Even though from the outside, I mean, that's why you see all these stars killing themselves, or they're on drugs. They're not happy with who they are, and you take somebody who is just even someone with a big Twitter following. It's like, they might just be somebody with a phone, but all of a sudden there's all this press, you might just be somebody that I just like acting. I enjoy creating characters, and I enjoy being seen, and I enjoy rich storytelling or whatever. But personally, like, if it's after a show or whatever, like, I just want to go home. I don't want to deal with the public. I just want to have my work speak for itself. And I lost my train of thought. Shoot.
No, man, you were going. You were talking about.
There was a point to it all. I forgot what it was. Unfortunately,
well, you were saying, how as much about movie stars being disconnected. So we were that's how it started. You were talking about movie stars being disconnected, and you were saying how how lonely.
It's just the broader idea was just people who become trapped in this idea of themselves. First of all, I mean, especially if you're a man, I think if you're not working as an actor, or you are working as an actor, you take value in that. It's a value judgment about yourself. You have a reason for being, but then take that. You're insulated in this bubble where your agent, your manager, your publicist, all this press is about you, telling you how great you are. You have all these fans who are telling you how great you are. So that's kind of blowing you up, and all you are deep down inside is some little kid who grew up in Virginia or whatever, and all of a sudden, found something that they're good at, and now everyone in the world knows who they are. And I think there's a lot of. I think that gets lost a lot, is that these people are also people, and they have their own hangups, and no amount of fame or notoriety or money is going to take away from any of that. There's a hey Virginia, what's going on?
Hell,
South Virginia.
So what I'm getting at is that there's a lot of fear and insecurity in the industry, and it's exacerbated by the kinds of people that go to the industry. But the flip side of that is what we were saying before, is the people who have a bigger well of empathy, and they tend to, at least in the past, they tend to lean more towards curiosity and trying to understand the world as it is. But that's now discouraged. You can't ask any questions. So,
yeah,
do so at your own peril.
Conformity creates fantastic art. Didn't you all know?
Yeah. Well, it does in the anti-way. Once you create this conformist situation, there's usually the rebellion to that is where the art comes in. And I that's what I anticipate. That's what this has kind of become in a way, because as much as a lot of this that we do and other channels that, inspired us to get going, are criticizing Hollywood and telling Hollywood what we would want if you would make it. It's also become an entertainment source in and of itself, in a place to, shout out to Who Knew the Salt Must Flow, one of my early subs, saying this is a great conversation. There's 26 people watching. There'll probably be hundreds of people who watch the playback just to see us talk about this. And yeah, all right, this is a smaller channel, but much bigger channels are like literally competing with like sports with their turnout for views and things like that. So like, this is kind of the rebellion, so to speak. And as much as they have created this creative conformity in their head, whereas politics and telling a certain type of story and all the other things that go on with Hollywood, we have become inadvertently or otherwise the anti-conformity that hopefully will come and is in and of itself an art. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about off screen. I think we may have said on screen. We're still learning the ins and outs of this technically, and I'm putting up comments because I want to make sure the chat's involved, but I also love the conversation, everything you're doing. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. We're all still trying to figure out, but at the same time, I know I'm ranting and saying a lot of things. People are coming out to see this, and this it's not just a critical of Hollywood or critical of the machine of conformity. It is the rebellion, and many ways the kind of the antithesis. I mean, Logan Paul is the biggest boxer on earth right now.
And there's also going to be a point, I think, where the level of expertise is going to, if not catch up to, maybe even surpass what's available. I mean, part of the problem with the system as it is that the top talent is going to be there just because they get paid a lot of money to be there, and they can, and their level of skill and experience allows them to command that kind of salary. But I also think that more and more people, I mean, I know personally, I'm on a kick right now. That's one of the reasons I'm reading Aristotle, because I want to go back to the basics and understand why it is that we tell stories. Where does an actor fit into that story? What are the most artistic choices that I can make? I think one of the most rebellious things artists can do right now is just to make art for its own sake, to make art that is beautiful, to have as their goal to create some kind of transcendent emotional experience for the audience. I mean, even that in and of itself will be rebellious, because you're actually focusing on what you want the audience to experience as opposed to trying to improve them sociopolitically. So I think there's going to be a point where more and more people begin asking or looking deeper, and it's going to not just be about, well, I want to shoot this movie because I want to put out some content or grow some YouTube followers or whatever. It's like, I want to shoot this movie because yeah, I want to get more YouTube followers, but I really want to tell a story about a man trying to preserve his family under extraordinary circumstances, and how he grows and how that breaks him or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? The technology will improve, but I think that the expertise in the craft will also improve. And at that point, I mean, I think the old system as we knew it is sort of already vanishing to irrelevance. I mean, when you have an Oscar broadcast that pulls in fewer viewers than the average PewDiePie upload, I think, you might have to say that you're doing something wrong. But once quote unquote, we the people catch up with a level of expertise, editing, cinematography, lighting, sound design, writing, acting, I mean, that's kind of game over at that point. I think the bubble's going to have to pop at some point. The Hollywood
Thank
bubble.
you for saying that, because I say that, and a lot of people are pessimistic, and I'm like, well, I saw it happen with music, though. I saw it happen in 2004. Like, everyone had Fruity Loops, not FL Studio, just Fruity Loops, and people were like, oh, you need to use equipment and all this other stuff, and generations of people learned how to use their computer in order to create the now industry standard stuff for a genre, and allowed any human being, regardless of genre, to create music and flatten that world. I know it can be done with this. I also see it happen with video games, where indie games, one or two people could create a game and generate more money than major, AAA gaming companies if it was a flop, but even some just so massively successful. And it has to be able to happen in film. There has to be a way. It shall happen, because people still want to see good film and good entertainment.
I think, it's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just there's a tremendous amount of money and expertise that goes into making any kind of good amount of, film or television. It's like staggering. Until you try to do it yourself, you honestly can't understand how much expertise goes into the things you don't even think about, like shots matching, like color and shots matching. Like that's a skill that's incredibly expensive to hire, like a colorist is. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but I wonder if, I guess, because if you're the expert in that field, like if that's the thing that still moves you, I guess trying to say don't do that is ridiculous. I mean, you should be contributing to your art as best you can. I just wonder if the stronger pull, or if the more impactful thing will be to eventually, pull enough audience away from the film and television to the point where it's no longer profitable for the people who do spend all this money on it, meaning that they'll eventually have to come back to the audience and be like, we're sorry. We will begin to make things that are interesting, and like we'll hire people and give them more autonomy and stop preaching and practicing this, because I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is just my point of view, but maybe it could happen. But I just feel like the the mechanism for distribution of something on the scale of a film and television is pretty tough to rival eventually.
Well, I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I'm looking at it for how expensive, like you just said, it's a very expensive product. This is not, right? And okay, and not even this. I think there's also an audience willingness to suspend disbelief. And we've seen fan films like I bring up the Bat in the Sun. I've seen Star Wars fan films that when you look at, okay, I would accept this quality of work if it was an original property with the same storytelling that I'm looking for, with interesting characters, with heart, with whatever you're looking for, specific to genre. And then there's also other, ways to, like, creators figured it out before it, years and years ago, where you have we talk about Kevin Smith, Clerks, something like Clerks. That's not I'm sure the budget for that movie was very small. I think we've even talked about some of the early Robert Rodriguez movies and how cheap they were to make. Now,
they still needed Hollywood to distribute it, though. That's the thing.
But like you can distribute it on Amazon Prime, on YouTube itself, on things like that. You know what I mean? That's now a thing.
I mean, look, my buddy Jared, like, he just made a film, like, for us, it's non-union, so it, like, if it was union, he said, like, if you scaled up, it would have been something like $150,000 or $200,000. Like, it's still a pretty modest budget. And he's right now in the process of that distribution. Like, he just, got a very small distribution deal that's not, a mainstream house. So, you know what? I mean, let's investigate it. Like, let's chronicle it. Let's talk to him and see where it goes with him. Because it's
I would love to.
You're not wrong in the sense that it's possible. It's just like, is it profitable in the sense, like, will it match the amount of money it's going to cost to make something like that?
It depends on scale. I don't think you can crowdfund Infinity War or fund an Infinity War independently.
Right. No, I agree. I'm just saying, but even so, like, New Bomb Turk is pointing out that Clerks budget is just over $25,000, and that's in the 90s. So, I don't know what the inflation on that is, but it's got to be
75. I'm guessing.
I would think at least. So it's like, so we're talking about that. So it's like you'd have to just
EVS got $1 million though.
Yeah, EVS is EVS though, and also, like, EVS doesn't need to pay technicians.
We don't know what's going to happen in 5 years though. There may be a kid.
Brother, I understand. Like, I appreciate your optimism, and I'm just trying to keep it realistic. I'm not trying to say, like, yeah, definitely. If it's just like, EVS doesn't have to pay an editor, doesn't have to pay, colors, doesn't have to rent cameras and equipment and all this shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's different. If you could, a comic book, even it's like even a AA comic book. What's that have? I mean, how many people would make a comic book? 10?
True, but I mean, like, to me, there's big of a market. I'm sorry that we kind of got off on a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. We're just having a debate without you, Cliff.
No. What are your thoughts to our debate?
Well, I just think that it is correct that it takes a lot. I mean, the fact that any movies actually get made is kind of a miracle, or that episodic television keeps going week after week is sort of a miracle. I mean, they're so heavily, especially a television show. It's so heavily regulated. Every minute has to be accounted for because there's so little time. They're trying to do so much. So there's a lot of parameters and strictures that they have to work inside of. It's very systematized, and it kind of needs that. At the same time, I agree that people are watching movies on their tablets and their laptops and smartphones. I think there could be a market for people to develop a following, their own individual followings online, and get project crowdfunded. I mean, I've had people reach out to me with expertise privately saying, I work on this, and I'd be willing to help, and I just want to do more art, and not all of these people are hacks. So I think there are amateurs out there who for the right projects will be willing to kind of, not make big bucks. I mean, not that, you'll get rich on any of this, but I think the broader point is that the distribution is there. You can get really decent equipment and make things look okay for a fraction of the cost that Hollywood is, even though you're not going to get that specific quality, and you're probably not going to get, as much staff as you need. But I do think that there is a possibility. I mean, even the comic book guys we were talking about, I mean, didn't EVS just buy a warehouse? I don't think he had one a couple of years ago. So, I mean, I envy those comic guys whenever they're shilling their self-published books, because I'm like, God, listen to how excited your boy Zach sounds when he's talking about his new things. He's just creating an industry from scratch, and he's hiring people and yada yada yada. And so I take your point about being realistic, but I also ask myself, why couldn't it be us? I mean, Antonio Sabato Jr. just his film, a new film he produced in the God is Dead franchise. I mean, I tweeted about it a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I probably wouldn't see it just because of it's the God is Dead franchise. It's not on my list of things that I'm flocking to the movies to see. But his story is that he was like kind of pushed out of the industry because of his beliefs, and now he's making films that are asking important questions, I think. So, people are doing it, and it's possible. I think more people need to just either get fed up and decide to do their own things. I mean, I know that I go back to why I'm reading some of the old classics, because I really want to understand storytelling and what it is, and what the point of all of this is. Like, why am I even alive? Why am I an actor? Why, and is it not enough to be an actor? No, it's not. You have to create things. You have to write things and produce things. If someone, if Tim Pool figured it out, I think then the rest of us can jump on board and do whatever we can do in this space. We're not going to get rich. We may not have the sort of, we might not be talking about how well our films are going to be doing in the Chinese market, but I don't know, man. I mean, yeah, you have to be realistic, and it does take a lot of effort and manpower and organization to pull off one of these projects. But it's always impossible until someone does it.
Someone does it. Yeah.
Good point. Very good point.
Real quick, got a shout out.
Hey, Comics Division.
Hey, what's going on, Comics Division?
FNT member, because this is the second time we've actually done this, where we get the FNT guests early before they get them, even though you were on FNT first. But yeah, Comics Division, I appreciate you being here. And I see people keep constantly bringing up the budgets. And another thing is, never underestimate audiences' willingness to like something and to want to like something. Overlook maybe technical thing. I keep seeing in the comedy space where a lot of YouTube and Instagram comedians will do sketches that are, to me, way funnier than anything you would see on Saturday Night Live, and you overlook the budgetary things. The guy's in his house, but he's supposed to be somewhere else. You just suspend disbelief and go with the joke a lot of times. And so the audience themselves, and it's not going to be this sniper shot. You might have one or two smash hits, but for the most part, it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And again, Hollywood's not producing stuff that's making money. I have no idea how the Star Trek guy, he didn't score 40 touchdowns last year. He doesn't average 30 points a game, but they paid him like 5 years, $150 million, like he's a top athlete, when he's never produced anything that has made money. Screw the wokeness, screw everything. All of his projects have failed, yet he's giving money. Like, that can't be sustainable. Excuse me.
He's in the club, you know what I mean? He has the right. He has the right beliefs, he has the right belief system. And it baffles and it amazes me as well at how people continue. It seems to almost be a feature in a lot of these sort of circles that people kind of fail upwards somehow. They succeed in spite of themselves. And I'm not trying to knock anybody in particular, but it's like, if I were a doctor or a surgeon and my patients keep dying, I probably am not going to keep getting work as a doctor or a surgeon in the future. If I'm somebody whose job it is to, fix cars, I probably am not going to continue to get hired if the cars that I work on keep exploding or their brakes keep failing and people keep dying. But yet you can preside over all kinds of flops. You can have the worst films. You can generate the worst kind of publicity. You can damage your brand and still find yourself gainfully employed.
Yeah. Here's an interesting one too, is the showrunners for the new Lord of the Rings show on Amazon. They have one credit on IMDb before this.
That's insane.
One.
That's
why
insane.
would you entrust such a huge property to people with such little experience?
How do you get that? How do you even interview for that job if you don't have like not even a resume? What were you? And there's so little information about it. Like I tried to Google the guy, and like the best I could find is the guy was born in the 80s. Like that's it. Like they don't even have a date about this guy.
But
well,
how little is known about this person.
Well, I think part of it. I was working on a. Can we swear on this podcast?
Yes,
fuck
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, I was doing a guest spot on this Fox show, which I got canceled, so there's no more residuals for me, unfortunately. But we were on set, and we were talking about, there's a few actors on the set that were from New York, so I knew them. So when the cameras aren't rolling, we're shooting the shit. And we were talking about how there's just the level of mediocrity, because when you come up, especially from the New York scene and the sort of grit that it takes to survive, just in there, when you start doing a little bit well, and you hustling. To be in New York is a hustle, and so a lot of the actors that come out of there have a chip on their shoulder just because of that kind of a thing. So me and this other New York actor, who's one of the leads on the show, we're talking, and I was like, yeah, man, just it seems like there's a lot of just like mediocrity. And he just cuts me off. He goes, "It's too many motherfuckers working." And the thing is, like, he was right, because there's so many shows now. There's so many streaming platforms. There's you got at one time you had like Microsoft producing shows. Like everyone's producing shows, and like people have to be filling those roles. And so I wonder if part of it is that there's different platforms that the top talent is going to, or that they're being drawn to. It might be streaming television because of all the freedom and time that allows. But it might just mean that certain parts of the market are just experiencing. I mean, I know we're talking about a series. Maybe people are spread too thin, or it could just boil down to there's so much material now that there's an ideological kind of capture. But also, there's just too many motherfuckers working. And
there's too many motherfuckers working, but there's too few motherfuckers that are willing to pick and let them work, right? So it's like you have, maybe if this is the entirety of people who want to work in the industry, it's like this many people are allowed to work in the industry, right? Because you have to have the right politics, and you have to have the right friends, and you have to say the right thing, and your last project's got to be hot. And there's so many different little pre-qualifiers that there's probably someone who could knock the shit out of this Lord of the Rings a TV series, but they're are they even in the conversation? Are they even allowed to get this job? What's that?
They're driving an Uber right now as we speak.
Right, exactly.
There was this was a few years ago. I was in LA. I was testing for something, and I just it was such a bizarre experience, because that town is such an industry town, and you're picking up interns for different studios, and your driver has been writing scripts for 35 years, and there's just no, this is LA, there's just no escape to it. Mm-hmm. It's just it's a crazy world. I lost my train of thought again. There was something I was going to say.
You said you were testing for something out there, and it was just the weird experience of being in that wacky town.
I mean, it's a weird place to be. What were we talking about? It was because it was connected to what we were all saying.
Who gets like what jobs and what?
So people with no credit can end up with Lord of the Rings.
So for one, there's a great book called One Less Bitter Actor by a guy named Mark Flanagan, and in this book he talks about how the sausage is made, in terms of like how about the hiring process. And anybody who has ever been a reader for auditions, and when you're a reader, that means that you are acting with the actors coming in auditioning for the prospective role. So you're reading the script with them. So in these hours long sessions, you're seeing different actors come in and read the same material. You're reading it back to them, and what you begin to see from the inside, or at least the first layer of the inside, is that oftentimes it has very little to do with how great or how bad the actor is. What they're looking for is how right that actor is for a role. I mean, I've seen people give amazing auditions that didn't even get a call back. I've seen people that I was like, yo, that was straight trash, and they end up making down to the final 3 or whatever. And part of it is because, as Mark Flanagan writes, it's about it's rarely about hiring the best actor. It's about hiring the actor that people feel the most comfortable with. And then you have that this is a very, very relationship driven industry. That's a part of it too. You have to be in enough people's good graces, increasingly being seen as easy to work with or as a nice person, someone who is agreeable, someone who is easy to get along with, not too much ego, not too much of a diva. That helps in terms that can almost supersede talent in terms of why people get hired. There's politics that go into it as well. And, we've seen from other channels that cover this kind of a thing. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are at play. But when you're in the middle of it, and when you're that person who's getting these projects, because, well, this is somebody that has handled big projects before and they're safe. They've proven themselves before, and and they're likable, and they think all the right things. And so that's enough. And, they have great publicists.
To spite their face, in a way.
Say what?
They're cutting off their noses to spite their face.
Well, but there's also a practical kind of business aspect of it as well. If part of it is, it's a very reactionary industry, and it's a very trend driven industry. So if someone is getting all these jobs, or if someone all it takes is one job, one show, one role, one script or whatever. And, and then they generate what's called buzz about you. And, people, you have different relationships. If you have a good agent, they're calling up different producers and casting offices, and, your reputation just grows over time. And at a certain point, you become a safe bet. And
in defense of all those like very selective characteristics, there is definitely a portion of like authentically mentally ill people that are drawn to the entertainment industry. And I don't mean like SJW mentally ill or like people with depression. I mean people who are crazy, like they're fucking nuts. Like I used to work at a place that would have like auditions like all day. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Kaz out in LA, but I used to just work at like a place next door, and like you would see like lunatics, like maniacs. So it's like people would just whatever it is, there's just that many percentage of people that want to be it. So it's like you also do need to protect against that a little bit. Like you can't be responsible for hiring someone who's like mentally ill, like flipping over the craft services table because they gave a good audition. Like you do need to vet people on like more than one level. So as much as I want to trash them for being exclusives, it's like they
Amber Heard works in Hollywood, so I don't know. Just cut his finger off.
I don't know about that. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. But it's not. We're not really disagreeing. There's just a practical matter of people decide. It goes into who is safest to hire. I've been in positions where I've been contacted by directors who wanted to hire a specific actor, and they were like, "Well, I heard the actor you were working with that I want to hire got fired from the thing y'all were working on. Could you talk to me about that?" And so it's a very, very relationship and sort of network driven business. And once you're in the right circles, it really is about who at a certain point. And that's kind of the issue too. All the same people know each other, and it's any career, any career is a miracle, and getting any job is a miracle. And when you get a string of jobs and a string of properties that happen to hit all the right notes and all the right people are working on them, it's a career is basically lightning in a bottle over and over and over again. And at some point you got to miss. So there's a lot of factors that go into who is chosen for roles and chosen for different projects. And a lot of it is just, this person is hot right now, and this person is safe, and they've proven themselves in the past, and I like them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true.
So real quick before we continue, I did not miss. We talked about lunatics. The Wade now, he's our resident lunatic with the best super chat smoking right now, tipping 420. He actually says, "Hail to my favorite YouTubers, and what a guest! Y'all asked Clifton to sing something. LOL." So yeah, if you're willing, if you want to sing, feel free, because I know you are a really good singer. But
oh yeah, well, no, I only do it now if I'm paid to do it. So
fair enough.
If you're good at something, never do it for free.
If you're good at something, never do it for free. Yeah.
Wake down. Also, just a secondary note. I sent you a message, Vigilante. I don't know. I didn't tell you this. No one knows this, but I did manage to get a copy of that horror movie that we were discussing last week. If you remember, I did manage to pull it off.
Okay.
Yeah, so Clifton, something that's gone on my channel a few times. That's just because it's fun and cathartic. Is we've gone into like my acting history, and we've got into some of the like lesser than perfect projects that I was in, and started making fun of them. Last week we did a pretty intense one where I played a yoga instructor.
That was wild.
That was insane. So I
felt
played
like
a yoga.
I was watching an Illuminati initiation ritual.
It was bananas. I played a yoga instructor who on the side did like BDSM like furniture stuff for old women for like a significant amount of money, and it was for one of those like bad Lifetime shows, and had video of that and watched that on the show, and I just discovered that I have a copy of this terrible horror movie that I was in.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever gone back and watched your stuff like that, for the pleasure of others, but actually, it's pretty freeing.
Oh God, well, I can't stand to watch myself on camera most of the time.
It's pretty painful.
Even if I'm auditioning for something and I tape myself for something, it's hard to watch the playback. But at the same time, it is like you kind of have to come to grips with like, this is what I look like. I sound kind of weird, and this is how I carry my body.
Right.
And it's just what it is. Once you can, that's the thing, man. That's part of the paradox of it. You have to. This is an industry and a life that is full of shame, but in the practice of what you do, you have to be shameless, and you can't take yourself too seriously. I mean, you just can't do it because it's a ridiculous job. It's just a ridiculous job, and you get asked to do. I mean, think of every zany, ridiculous commercial you've ever seen, and understand that they probably auditioned like dozens, if not hundreds, of people for that crazy role. You got all these adults, crowding into a small room, being like, and doing all kinds of crazy nonsense just for a paycheck. And so if you look at it from that perspective, man, you can't really.
It's almost the wisest way to go about it, because like you do those commercial auditions where like, you get paired up with a group of people and they're just like, okay, so then you saw a clown car got into a car accident with a bunch of aliens, and now you have to react like it's happening. Okay, everyone be really energetic, and it's like the most like awkward, like degrading, like also like I just finished, like you said, like doing Hamlet in acting class like yesterday, and now I'm just like, whoa, is that a clown? Like it's like the weirdest contrast. It's such a strange journey for that performer, but
well, but you have to have the capacity as a performer to make a fool of yourself. I mean, that's how you find all the interesting kind of tidbits. I mean, the thing. There's a great book. I don't know if you heard of it, but it's called The Intent to Live. It's by a guy named Larry Moss. It's one of the best acting books I've ever read. And the title, I mean, it just is what, the intent to live. As an actor, it's your job to be alive and to create, to take, as you were saying earlier, you have to look at this page and create some kind of a flesh and blood human being that's interesting to behold, that becomes compelling to an audience. And there's a craft and a technique that you can use to do that, but part of it is you can't have inhibitions about yourself. And there's a great chapter in that book, The Intent to Live, where he just rants about being cool. And I feel like a lot of times you have people now who they just want to be stars, but they don't want to be actors. They want to be famous. They want to be considered cool. They want to have some kind of status, but they don't actually want to dig deep and just get to the nitty gritty, ugly stuff of what it is to just be a human, like the nuts, the guts, and the heart of what it is to be a person, and what the enormity of what that is, because you have every single piece of experience, every piece of the human condition is inside of you waiting to be exploited. But if you're just worried about like looking cool for your peers or whatever, then you're not going to be at the rehearsals, just rolling around on the floor, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, because you want to be safe, and you don't want to offend anybody. You want people to like you, and so you end up turning in boring, sanitized work. And I think that's what's happening on a broader scale, as far as a lot of the drama and the cinema that we have to produce. It's safe, it's sanitized, and it's created by people who don't know how to dig into the cracks of and work around in the basement of what it is to be human. And they're not telling these big, rich stories anymore. It's just formulaic and just kind of boring and stale and shallow.
I agree. I will say, in defense of the actor, though, every other aspect of your life as a professional is being scrutinized. It's, just as soon as you tell your family you're going to do it, they're just like, all right, this kid, all right, let's go through this phase. You know what I mean? All your friends are like, oh, you're going to go be an actor, huh? And then it's like, casting directors, at the scrutiny that they give you, and agents, the scrutiny they give you when you meet people in the world, and it's like, you're an actor. It's like, well, what have you been in? Like, nothing. It's like, oh, so you're a loser. So it's like there's this constant like scrutiny of just the fact that you're even trying to do this, that and I know other actors too. It's like you get this kind of stiffness almost around you, because it's like you're afraid to even step in and embrace what it is you're doing, because it's such a brutalized world. I mean, I never had a problem being rejected from auditions. It never bothered me. Like, obviously it would wear you down, but I never cared. The things that would really eat me up was when you'd go to like have a meeting with an agent, and they would just treat you like you weren't even a fucking person. That was the shit that would always eat at me, because that was the disrespect of my soul, of my character, of who I am. Whereas I turned into bad performance. I wasn't right for the role. Who cares? I mean, that's the job. It was all the other shit around it that really started to beat me up. And I see that's a big part of I can see why people have more inhibitions as an actor.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, it's nice work if you can get it, as the show says. I enjoy the work, but the industry around it is where a lot of the problems lie. And that's the thing, is that the people that we enjoy watching the most are the ones who end up becoming the stars that we remember. They're the ones who are the most unique. One of my favorite stories is about how Dustin Hoffman scored the job, the lead role in The Graduate. And I haven't read the novel that the film is based on, but apparently in the original novel, the central character is a sort of all-American, sort of a Robert Redford type, back when he was young and gorgeous or whatever. And so they came down to the final two. The studios came down to the final two actors, and they're doing their screen test for the role. I think one of the scenes they had to do was when he first meets or when Mrs. Robinson. If anyone hasn't seen The Graduate, they have to go see it. It's a really great film.
It is.
But it's like Mrs. Robinson's first kind of seduction of lead character's name. But in the novel, apparently he's just this all-American, and I think the other actor, I forgot who it was, but came in and gave what even the producers and the writers said was one of the best auditions they'd ever seen. On the other hand, Dustin Hoffman comes in, and I mean, he knows it, but and he kind of parodied himself when he did the film Tootsie. But very neurotic, just very nervous, just and scared. And Dustin left that audition feeling like he knew he had blown it. There's no way he was going to get that job. And what the people behind the scenes said was that, yes, the other actor fit the role physically, and he gave a fantastic audition. It was perfect. But what Dustin did was memorable, and he was alive. You had no idea what he was going to do. So even though Dustin Hoffman is dying on the inside, I mean, I think there's a moment in Rain Man he talks about where there's a point where he had to go to an emotional place, and he was frustrated with himself because he wasn't going. So he starts beating on himself. He's beating on himself as an actor. But that's the take that ends up in the movie. In The Graduate, going back to The Graduate, there's a scene where Mrs. Robinson does something that's really freaking hot and sexy, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. So he goes to the back wall and starts banging his head against it. That was Dustin Hoffman taking out his frustrations as an actor, in the scene. But it was such lifelike behavior. It's such random, and it's so random and kind of weird. But people do that kind of stuff. I mean, you see Joaquin Phoenix in The Joker, that scene where he just climbs into the refrigerator. Like, who does? That's just so weird. I guarantee you they were on set, and Todd Phillips was like, I'm going to run this camera, and Joaquin, just do what you feel like doing. And he probably did a bunch of crazy stuff and a bunch of different takes, but something about him in the moment struck him and said, I'm going to get in this refrigerator. And Todd Phillips had the wherewithal to say that's such a weird kind of a thing, but it's so appropriate because you have this character, Arthur Fleck, who's shutting himself off from the rest of the world in the most weird way possible. That's kind of a big element of the movie, but you have to have people who are that sensitive and who are that kind of smart and keen to recognize those kind of flashes of brilliance and savvy.
I mean, to Dustin Hoffman, man, like there's that famous line to "I'm walking here," completely improvised. You know what I
he's
mean?
in the moment, but it's stuff like that. But you need actors who are eccentric like that in a weird kind of way. I mean, De Niro, he's such a brilliant transformational actor. By the way, you can no longer say the word transform, as I understand it, because it's offensive to a certain group of people.
Wow.
But yes,
that's news to me.
Yeah, it was news to me too when I heard it. But
what are Transformers going to do?
We literally, I don't know.
They're just the Earths.
They're going to get pinged by the SPLC. Who knows? But you need a level of uniqueness. Robin Williams, I mean, great example. That there's no one else like Robin Williams. There's no one else like Clint Eastwood. There's no one else like Sam Jackson or Lawrence Fishburne or Denzel Washington or James Earl Jones. But they came up at a time and in the system where merit was more of a thing and not telling some kind of a message. And and we're not really in a culture now, I feel like, that values that kind of eccentricity and that kind of uniqueness, because we demand so much conformity. I'm like, since when is it not cool for artists to be individuals and be interesting and be controversial? That's kind of
social media. Since social media became the thing.
But a lot of these people are just boring now, and just it used to be. So the whole point about that is I don't think we're a culture that really fosters uniqueness now in a broader sense. Now we run away from it, even though we see, as we were talking about as we got online, before we got online, is that now the era of the movie star and the celebrity is kind of diminished, if not over, because we have all this access to these stars now, and we're seeing that they're not really as interesting as the random person who's sitting, in his bathrobe or something, giving his thoughts to a webcam. You know what I mean? Like they're just not. We're like, these normies are actually kind of really fascinating, and so, and unique in a way that these like clean, polished kind of hoity-toity, bourgeois, disconnected stars are not.
Yeah.
And it's pretty boring. I mean, it's like my favorite person to listen to is Gary, like from Nerdrotic. It's just like, he's just a dude used to own a comic shop, like not a celebrity, not an expert, but it's like he's the most fascinating person that I enjoy listening to. And it's, I mean, how do you can't manufacture something like that in Hollywood? You just can't do it.
No. And a lot of these people, like Gary and Critical, I mean, or PewDiePie, they're building, or Tim Pool, they're building audiences organically, and that they're building a following organically. And it's not, there's not or Joe Rogan, there's not this huge studio push, I had a publicist for a brief period, and that's how people get tickets to like events and premieres and openings to big events. Their publicist is doing that for them oftentimes, and they get, that's how they get features and puff pieces in the New York Times or Vanity Fair or Variety or the Hollywood Reporter. Deadline, not so much, but that's more of a scoop kind of a thing, or Entertainment Weekly. There's a machine in place that is sort of pushing. It's a marketing machine, but it's pushing these particular actors onto the public, and whether or not they belong there or not. Meanwhile, you have these content creators who are, they're in touch directly with the audience. That's why, it's so amazing to me that, we go back to He-Man about, you see the quote unquote critical reception, but then you look at the audience reception and that huge disconnect that's there. There's just, we're at a time when we can be more connected and aware of each other than usual. It seems like the industry is kind of determined to just not pay any attention to any of that, and I think they're going to lose out in the long run if they don't sort of reorient the ship.
Agreed.
Yeah. Real quick, I have to get in to a super chat, another super chat. My man Goldman Kyle 79. Talk about cultivating audiences. A lot of these people have super chatted. They've super chatted before, and a lot of the people in the chat are kind of a part of our core audience who've been coming back week to week. So I want to thank all you guys for being here, and of course, again, thank Clifton. And this super chat for $5, Gomer says, "Hail VW, Matt, and Mr. Duncan," and he wants to thank you, Clifton, for apparently we were talking about singing earlier. You already sung "Happy Birthday" for his wife Melissa, and he says, "I act like a damn goofy idiot for free, VW. If Wake Wake down's the head loony. I'm second in charge. Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here, and thanks for the super chat. And again, thank you. Apparently, you that's who you sung "Happy Birthday" on FNT. I'm assuming unless you sung "Happy Birthday" before outside of that. I'm not sure.
I don't know, but thanks, Gomer Kyle, and I love your avatar. I love his avatar is from Big Trouble in Little China, which is one of my favorites. Henry Swans is my name, and Excitement's my game. It's the best. God, I love that movie. You ever seen that, Clifton? You ever seen that Big Trouble in Little China?
No, actually, I haven't seen that.
It's a John Carpenter film. It's just a masterpiece. It's just so much fun, and Kurt Russell plays this great, like, kind of John Wayne type American character, but he's like way out of his depth, and like really shouldn't even be here, but just has this like great endearing, like kind of everyman character that you really you follow, and you want him to win, even though he's kind of a clown. He's kind of a joke, but it's it's a really awesome gem from the 80s.
Nice.
I recommend.
They made so many of those in the 80s. You know, one of my favorite things to do is to go, and I recommend people do this too, is like go to YouTube and you look up old episodes of Siskel and Ebert and just watch like the films that they talk about and they recommend. And there's a lot of stuff that just got forgotten, but are really good movies that they talk about that was just of the time. And it's also funny because you begin to see that I won't say that the industry wasn't. The industry is definitely more "quote unquote" diverse than it is now. But I mean, I will say that Siskel and Ebert, they were talking about a lot of different kinds of movies, through the 80s and the 90s especially. But if anyone needs good movie recommendations, just go down the YouTube rabbit hole and watch these guys argue about movies. It's so delightful, and it teaches you how to watch movies too on a certain level as well.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I've never done that. It's a cool thing to do.
Well, then you should.
I should, and I will, man. That's cool. I remember watching Siskel and Ebert back in the day when I was younger, like the tail end of Siskel, and then who was the guy after Siskel had left and then unfortunately passed? Roper. Yeah, I do remember watching Ebert and Roper quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I used to get into a lot of that stuff, especially when I was, kind of before the media. I think like I used to watch these guys who did the Hollywood Reporter, and there used to be a lot of great resources. I mean, the entertainment industry in this country used to be something pretty amazing. It really used to create a lot of great movies, a lot of great television, things that, like a lot of trash always, but there used to be kind of more of a collective passion of just like, how do they do it? Like what makes a good story? What are your favorite heroes, and people sharing the things that they like? It's only until recently. Yeah, absolutely. But it's only until recently that it became this kind of like, it always kind of had a cult like thing, but it wasn't, it was different. This is the first time it's become more of like,
corporate.
Like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like, what if, you know what I mean? Like screeching at someone who's a conservative, that's relatively new, I think, to be this exclusive and this cult like,
I mean, I wish we could go back to the days where the biggest problem with Hollywood is that it was just about money.
Mm-hmm. Right?
It's arguable that if it were just about money, then a lot of the movies would be. I won't say would be better, but I don't know. I feel like there's a larger incentive there to make a movie that will resonate with people than as opposed to like making movies to fit that all your peers will pat you on the back for making.
It's amazing when I used to complain about it, be like, oh, they're making this Transformers 3 shit. They don't care about making good movies. They just want to make money. And it's like, oh my God, I pray. I like, why did I say that? I wish they would just go back to making money.
Yeah, I would kill for Bayformers compared to woke formers.
Yeah.
Or
sure.
Formers. Can't say trans anymore.
Right. Well, Clifton, one thing that we have done on this channel and my channel too is I've tried to focus a little bit on things that we are enjoying, so that the entire conversation is not characterized with like negativity and vitriol. Like we did a stream praising Dusk Till Dawn one time, which was a blast, and we have some others we're planning on doing in the future. But what have you watched recently, or that you really enjoyed, or something that like you've revisited that you were like, oh God, I love this, had that like invigorating spirit? Like,
I can think of a few things. One, and it's kind of funny. This is another time I was doing a guest star. I think I was down in Memphis, and I'm in this hotel room, and I got a good hookup from I think it was the woman that was doing my hair for the duration of the shoot, and she had a good weed hookup, so I got a little bit, and so I'm wandering around in circles in this hotel room, stoned, having just watched the Tom Cruise film Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh, right on.
And I was so I'm sure part of it was the flowers, but I was so emotional because I was like, Tom Cruise, he knows what his job is. You know what I mean? Because think about it, man. Again, I go back to like it's a ridiculous job, but like I mean, you both seen the movie, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You remember that scene where he first figures out what's going on? Like he's died, and he's like, and there's this long scene of him waking up and realizing he's back on the base, and like, he's kind of re-experiencing everything. And the way that it's shot, there's this camera that's like panning around him, and the way that Cruise orients himself. I mean, again, this is a skill that you develop over time, but he makes sure that there's never a point where his full face is out of frame, so you can always tell what the character is going through. And it pulls back. You see that he's on this base, and that there's this musical swell, and combined with the sort of realization in Cruise's eyes. And now imagine that you're there shooting that day, and there's hundreds of people gathered around. There's all this equipment pointing down in this one spot. Everyone has to be absolutely fucking quiet. And in the center of all this activity and machinery is this tiny man who's just going, but when you see it on screen and you see it like combined with all the moments, and the music and the editing and the color correction, all the things that come together to create this great moment. And Tom Cruise knows what his job is. His job is to sell that moment in the story where his character realizes, I've just died, and yet here I am again. Holy shit, what's going to happen now? And and later on in the film, he does some ridiculous stunt where he's like launched from some machine. I'm like, dude, this is a dude in his 50s who's jacked. He's jacked out of his mind. I don't care, what his religious beliefs are or whatever, but the fact that this dude throws himself and his body into his work 100%. It was so thrilling to me to see that, because I was like, this is a movie that's made for pure entertainment. It tells an interesting story. It's got compelling characters, and it's got a cool concept. And I just loved it so much. Another film recently that I saw, I loved it because it's an idea of what movies could be and what it could do for an audience member. You're just swept away in this fictional, futuristic world. And Emily Blunt is fantastic in that movie as well. Yeah. I think, I would have loved to see what she could have done with Captain Marvel. She's such a great actress, in my opinion. But then, like, I watched, I was on a Clint Eastwood kick for a while. And so Unforgiven became one of my favorite movies of all time. You've got Gene Hackman, you've got Clint Eastwood, you've got Morgan Freeman. And it's a story about men and what violence does to men, and how some rise to the challenge and how others shy away from it, and how men deal with the psychological aspects of being a man. And there's so much depth in the storytelling. And one of the greatest, one of my favorite shots from that movie, it's late in the movie after Clint Eastwood has started killing again. He's sort of reverted to this old piece of himself, his former self that's been demonized throughout the whole movie. And Clint, I don't know how old he is, but I think he's in his 60s at this point making this movie. So he's already got this angular face. It's got all these crags and wrinkles in it. There's blood streaming down both sides of his face. He's got these narrow slits for eyes. It's Clint Eastwood. And there's a fire that's happening off camera, and he's looking at it. And just the way that it's shot, the look on his face, the wrinkles, the blood, the dirt and everything, he looks like a demon. He looks like a demon. And it's one of these shots in the movie that's very artistically done. And it says so much with no words about where that character is right now. It's a visual medium. And you see that on Clint's. I mean, it's just it's a great movie. But then that moment, I'm just like, that's again why I want to see more moments like that in the theater, where I'm looking at a monster on screen, but it's not really a monster. It's just this character who's like going through something. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm kind of going off. And the last thing I'll say was a Clear and Present Danger, the Harrison Ford movie where he's playing Jack Ryan. I think it was the second movie he played Jack Ryan, and after Patriot games. And what I loved about that film, you know, it was political in a way, like it wasn't super pro-America. The American government definitely played a role in the film, but it wasn't seen in this great light. But meanwhile, you have, you know, this character at the center played by Harrison Ford, and one of his mentors played by James Earl Jones, who I think symbolically is dying throughout the movie. Like James Earl Jones, his character is all about, you know, doing the right thing, how the government is supposed to serve the people, and this bigger idea of you know, the importance of patriotism and what America means. And he's dying throughout the movie. And meanwhile, you know, the Harrison Ford, Jack Ryan character is sort of at the center of this plot that's being perpetrated against him by the US government that he's hired to serve. But what I love about that movie is that Jack Ryan, you know, he's an analyst. He's not really a fighter. He's not, you know, he's a head guy. You know, he's not an action star, an action hero. He was in the Marines, but he can't really fight. But his enduring trait is that he has integrity, and he's honest, and he wants to do the right thing. And that's what gives him strength. It's not his ability to throw a punch. It's not how well he can shoot. It's his ability to stand up for what he believes in and to do the right thing. And it's just a movie from the 90s, you know, that it was so refreshing to see something like that said, you know, you don't have to, it's a different version of what a man can be. There are moments in the film where he's relying on his wife just for comfort, and just, you know, he's living under a stressful time. I mean, it's just there's something very deeply human about these kinds of things. And I mentioned before about how the old model, at least as far as Aristotle was concerned, is that, you know, when you're telling a tragedy, you're talking about people who are noble. In other words, they are better than we are, than we tend to be as people. And a character like Jack Ryan in that movie kind of embodies that ideal, that story ideal, where this is somebody who's going to rise above all of the corruption around him and risk his life. I mean, he almost dies a couple of times, but he has to tell the truth, and he has to do the right thing. And it's really just that simple. And so in terms of things that I've revisited, you know, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but there's just a lot of really great, just old stories, the Casablancas, the Ghostbusters. I mean, Do the Right Thing. There's so many great films from previous eras that, you know, Goodfellas. I'm just thinking about all these great movies, these great experiences that carry you along. And, you know, they're a slice of life where they tell some kind of epic, sort of insane story, but they carry you along with them. And that's what I think. That's kind of what I think our job is. That's why I was crying through my THC induced haze in that hotel room, because Tom Cruise he's throwing his body around and doing all this crazy stuff because he wants to make sure that I leave the theater having gotten my money's worth, and that it's worth the time that I spent that I can't get back. I mean, I can make more money even in this economy, I guess, but I can't get back that time. And I think that the great artists, the great entertainers, they understand that, you know, the audience deserves for its money something that they can't see anywhere else, and something that they'll never forget. And when you see something like that, and even if we don't have the vocabulary to talk about it, or we don't have Ivy League degrees, or we're not like masters or film buffs and breaking down this stuff, we know what we feel, and we know what we like, and we know what we take away as memories and as emotional experiences, as transcendent, like even spiritual experiences when we see stuff. And I know it sounds lofty and heady, but
it doesn't, man.
Yeah, Rough Girl. I remember those movies and don't remember current. Yeah, that's the thing, and that's what I've been trying to puzzle out the last couple of months. Is like, what is it about there seems to be a cutoff period. Because she's right. It's like what is being produced today that we can say that we'll still be watching 50 years from now, the way that I watch On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando, the way that I watch Kramer v. Kramer with Dustin Hoffman, the way that I can still watch Training Day or Malcolm X or Cry Beloved or Glory with Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
You know, like, or watching Pulp Fiction, the movie that really kind of shot Sam Jackson to stardom. It resurrected John Travolta's career. Going back and watching Bruce Willis in Die Hard play this incredible character, this hero. I mean, what is being produced today that is going to match the sort of classic stature of the kinds of movies that we love and that we grew up watching? I just don't see it. I don't see it.
Terminator
right now.
Dark Fate, surely.
Dude, but that's the thing. Like I can go back and watch. I think Terminator 2 is one of the best movies.
Oh man, you want to talk about crying?
And
that's
it's
right.
funny.
As a grown man, when
funny, right?
Then.
So I was watching. I was looking up clips of a woman named Camille Paglia. If no one knows who she is, I would definitely look her up because she has some very interesting lectures and interviews about the state of the arts and cinema, specifically. But she was talking about. She was on this panel and they had all these people from different points of view, a lot of conservatives, we're talking and this conservative pundit talks about the opening of Terminator 2, the main character comes down, he doesn't have any clothes on. And then he starts killing people just indiscriminately. There's no action. I'm like, dude, the whole fucking point of the movie is that he learns to be human. He's a robot who learns humanity throughout the film, and then he sacrifices himself to save humanity. That's what's so moving about it. It's not just you got to read deeper into this stuff. These films stick around for as long as they do because there's an underlying impulse to explore just the extremes of humanity that's just missing now in a world that's so cynical that can't produce anything but weapons or Albert Maltz. I refer to that essay again. It's political leaflets. They're leaflets. They're pamphlets that you're supposed to have
propaganda. It's propaganda.
Well, yeah, but it's propaganda, but it's not a good story. And I mean, sorry, but you see that thumbs up from Arnold when he's going down into the lava, and you're like, I'm crying right now.
Yes,
I'm crying at a robot who is dying. How is that?
Yeah.
What have they done to me? To elicit these emotions out of me? And I feel like there's just, if you can do that with a bunch of CGI, which still holds up, and your superstar, English is a second language, and he's kind of a parody of himself, and yet he's delivering these monotone one-liners, but you're still able to create a compelling character and central relationship out of that. That's storytelling brilliance, and I just don't see that level of care and humanity and frankly craft in a lot of stuff that gets produced today. I think some films in the MCU, for me, will endure, but that's also because I already had a vested interest in the material going in. I don't know. I mean, I don't see where the timelessness is. I think people are trying so hard to be timely, but they're not being timeless. And I mean, what's today's Back to the Future? What's today's Star Wars? What's today's Indiana Jones or Alien?
The only thing I can think of that's left an impact on me in the past, 5 years or whatever, is Joker. That's the only movie that comes to mind that was so powerful and so complex and genius and intellectually stimulating and visual and challenging and ugly and beautiful all at the same time. That's the only movie I can think of. And I think not everything needs to be on that level, but that's the only thing that sticks out to me that's come out recently that I will carry on with me.
And also, isn't it amazing that movie, as complex as it was, it made so much money, which leads me to think that perhaps the audience is not as dumb as you think, as many in the industry appear to think that they are.
Oh yeah.
Jordan Peterson brings this up a lot. The advent of this long form serialized television. We can handle complex relationships. I mean, I remember I watched the entire series of The Wire in a 2-month period. I mean, I was depressed for a long time after that. But one of the things that I enjoyed about the series is that it never insulted my intelligence, and it presented these people as people with flaws and sometimes crazy solutions to just outlandish problems. I mean, who would have guessed that a character like Omar, played by Michael K. Williams, would just be a big kind of thing? And you watch the journey and the development of that character over the span of time.
And that's a show that can deal with political issues and hot button topics and do it in a way that it's not preaching to you. It's not leading you to any kind of a conclusion. It's just displaying the world as it is and all its complexity and allowing you to kind of parse through it and come to your own conclusions, or sort of, just gain human empathy just by experiencing it. And it's infinitely more effective than any of the drivel they put out that thinks is fighting racism. I mean, the amount of depth and insight you can gain from watching The Wire is worth, I guess worth 10,000 of their projects, because it's the 10,000 of their projects will just make you, not want to hear anything from them. It's like they're so. It's just such a brilliant piece that it's like, and but that's the thing. Like, I don't know. It's such a complex conversation because even at the time, Hollywood didn't like recognize that. Like that guy got 2 Emmy nominations only in its 5th season, and the 5th season is the weakest one, the most Hollywood of the ones, and it's still like, I still think it's underappreciated.
Yeah, it is. It's but I think people that watch it, they know that it's good. I guess my position, and one of the reasons I became so outspoken is that I think audiences just deserve better, and I think that I also think in a broader sense, at least in American culture and society, art and the arts and in general, and artists in general, I mean, for a variety of reasons, they're not all unwarranted, hold very low esteem. And yet, I mean, I can look at the work of Puccini or Dostoevsky or Shakespeare or Chekhov or, Sophocles or Aristotle or whatever and say like, wow, Rembrandt, Da Vinci, all these incredible artists who some were revered in their time and others weren't. But at least there was a culture that was like, we're gonna dedicate ourselves to doing this great work, and there will be a culture there to support the really the best of the work. I don't know if that exists in the United States. Maybe it's just because we're a younger country and still kind of forging our culture, but
I think because our culture is so inevitably linked to commerce and not that it hadn't been before or whatever, but it's just that like really corporation and corporate thought that the creation of culture for culture's sake, which has to be at the heart of whatever you're doing, you have to have a story that you want to tell. And that's why Hollywood is not what it is, because they have an agenda they want to push, the leaflets, the film as weapons, as you art as weapons, as you spoke about, but they don't have I need to tell this specific story about this character for I just have to tell this story. I have to tell the story of Luke Skywalker going from a farm boy to a Jedi. I have to tell the story from Sarah Connor in the first Terminator being scared to in the second one, she's like this badass, you know what I mean? Yeah. She's progressed and she's smart and she's trying to get her son because she knows that her son is the future of humanity, and she's trying to train him at the same time, keep him safe.
And think about that. Sorry, but just really briefly, that is a very deeply human, recognizable trait. It's a mother wanting the best for their child. It is a mother. It is a maternal instinct driving that character. And that's what people connect to. It's not just the CGI. It's not just the one-liners. It's not just the violence and the action. There are deeply, deeply human things that people are glomming onto. There is a humanity at the center of these stories. There's a truth at the center of these stories. And that is why they endure. So sorry, I just had to interject that real quick.
No, you're right. And that's what's missing from Hollywood, the humanity, the truth. The instead of your truth, there is a truth. There's a human experience. Yes. There's a human condition. Art is supposed to speak to and about the human condition in whatever form it's expressed, whether it's a song or a painting or a film or a television show or even a podcast. I like to think there's an art to this. It's not supposed to be it's okay to want money from it, but it's not supposed to be like this demographic point, because that's how we got down the slippery slope of SJWs. It's like looking at humans as not humans and dehumanizing your audience. And they did that to such an extent that they're just those wacky conservatives, or those the whatever word. They're racist. They're this. They're toxic, and it's this way of dehumanizing the people you are trying to make art for, and in a way dehumanize yourself, because now you're so bubbled you don't even have connections to basic elements of the human condition, because now you're in this bubble cult that you've created.
That's part of the problem, is that and I try to explain to people that think about how many people who become tenured university professors, think of how many people become famous television pundits, Think about how many people become famous singers, famous actors, rock stars, famous athletes. Think of how many people become tech gurus in Silicon Valley, how many people become New York Times journalists, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the point is that, relative to the rest of the population, this cluster of people, the movers and the shakers of culture, the writers, the musicians, the ad execs, frankly, Silicon Valley people, who are shaping our very perception of reality in many cases. This is a small cluster of people. I call them the reality cartel. They're a small cluster of people who have an disproportionate influence on the broader culture. And it wasn't really till I knew this as a New Yorker for 15 years, but whenever you leave the city, you don't even have to go that far out of Manhattan before you start seeing that the state is actually quite red. It's just New York City, this central kind of hub. I know it's the same in California. The big cities are blue. When you get out to the less big cities, you have a little more variety in thought. And so, I'm down in a city like Atlanta right now and experiencing the same thing. It's like, normal people on the ground, they actually have other concerns in their life that have nothing to do with woke liberal politics. And they have much more immediate pressing concerns, feeding their families, keeping their lights on, dealing with medical expenses, all kinds of things. So they're more preoccupied than most of us are with they're less preoccupied with these cultural issues. But people in the industry are super consumed with these topics, and they think of themselves as avatars, and they want to change the world, which is a phrase I've been hearing for the past 20 years, and I'm freaking annoyed.
We're gonna change the world, man.
I'm gonna change the world.
I'm gonna shock the system.
I'm gonna now what they're saying is I'm gonna use my platform. No, stop using your fucking platform. Nobody cares about your platform. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has a platform now if they want to build one. So your platform is not special. Your shit is not more special than mine.
It's also presumptuous that you have all these answers that the rest of us need to hear.
Yeah.
The way the world is. It's very I don't know.
And you're in an industry which completely clusters you away from that for a variety of reasons. I mean, even the idea of just like, someone opening the classifieds or ads or whatever, just trying to find a job. I mean, if you have a great agent and manager, they send you stuff. You just live your life. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you're doing well enough where, you might be on unemployment for a little bit. You might be drawing money from residuals. Maybe you did a couple of shows. You got royalties coming in. If you did a Broadway cast recording, you've got monies coming in from a variety of places. And so you just kind of get to exist. And then when an audition comes in, you might chase after, be like, hey, I heard about this project coming up. I want to, get me in for that. But once you get to a certain place, you have casting directors, you have theaters, you have different producers reaching out to you to say, hey, are you interested in doing this project? Or, hey, we would like for you to read this script to see if you even want to audition in the first place, or you get a job offer anyway. So once you reach a certain point, you're past that stage where you're like, I'm hustling for work and hustling, trying to find a job and trying to find how the lights work, because you are insulated from all of those things. And, once you get the job, the studio or whoever's producing will fly you out to wherever you're shooting and put you up in a hotel, and so much more of your worries are taken care of. And if you're really lucky, you're making a lot of money. And if you do, you take one guest star appearance and you don't have to work for another couple of months at least. And so you get to kind of coast in life in a way that a lot of people just don't have the luxury of doing. And so even on just that level, you just don't live the kind of life that other people lead, and you don't have the kind of practical concerns that other people have in their lives. I mean, it's a huge, it's a disconnect that it's just, I don't know how you square that circle other than like people at the top. It's a very bourgeois industry now, and it services an increasingly an audience. They're servicing an audience that has the same bourgeois values as opposed to like the more, I guess, utilitarian, sort of salt of the earth, moderate kind of,
we're the peasants,
broader America. The plebs. The plebs.
Gentlemen, I got to dip out. Sorry, I apologize. You guys can continue this conversation, but I got a boogie.
Okay.
So Clifton, man, it was great talking with you. Thanks for coming on, man.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Anytime, dude. Anytime. And chat, lovely to see you all. Thank you so much. Ogre Squasher, you fund my life. You're the best. Thank you so much. Rough Girl, such a dildo, Tree Rock, everyone who was here, Gomer Kyle. Love you guys. And I will see you all around. See you around soon. So take it easy.
All right, peace, man.
Later.
Yeah. And we'll probably wrap up in a little bit. We usually go about 2 hours. But you know, I have
I talk a lot.
No, I appreciate the insight you brought, and I just appreciate, as a guy who's like always messed around with music, I've always been interested in art and talking about art and people who think deeply about art and think deeply about the not just the technical aspects but the emotional aspects. And I think you've been able to break a lot down along those lines. But I have a couple of quick thoughts. First off, I just shout out to Rough Girl. It's been great in the chat. We brought up Pulp Fiction. She has a Sam Jackson moment where it said, say subvert one more motherfucking time, basically. A lot of subversion goes. But I have this question I wanted to ask you. So we've talked about franchises subverting expectations. Sorry, Rough Girl. Or altering the franchise. And there's a lot of things. The huge thing in the streets are race swaps. And taking a character that was traditionally white and making that character either black, or I've heard like all sorts of names. What's it called? BAME or something like that, where black and other minorities or something like that, or something
BIPOC,
like that.
BAME, all those.
BIPOC.
We're not people anymore. We're just acronyms. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, that's tolerant and progressive, apparently. But like, so as an actor, as someone, you talked about how this industry is and how just working is the not the rule, it's the exception. Would you ever, if you're offered, you know, a black Superman, you're Black Superman, we're coming to you, Clifton Duncan, and if so, how would you treat that role, knowing the kind of like the legacy now of these race? I mean, some have been successful. We mentioned Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, and then others not so much. What are your thoughts on from an actor's perspective?
I think
a race swap character.
I think a few things about it. For one, on one level, I think it can be very insulting and demeaning because you're not building anything new with these characters. It's a hand-me-down franchise. You know, it's the equivalent of saying, well, you need this handout from this progressive institution, and here you are, darky, we're going to lift you up.
Yes,
you know,
basically, I feel
you can't do it yourself. That said, I mean, it also depends on the character. You know, if I were to play if I were offered, you know, Superman, it's tough because on one hand you're like, well, as an actor, again, unemployment is the rule and not the exception. You know, when's the next time you're going to get a chance to play Superman and have this kind of role in the limelight? I think if it's true that Michael B. Jordan was offered it and he turned it down, I mean, I think that speaks to his savvy.
Yeah, but now he's just producing his own. Is what it looks like. Well,
you know, I mean, do your thing. I mean, but at the same time, if it came down to someone were like, hey, you know, we want you to audition for Cyclops, then I would reconsider because, you know, as far as I understand about his story, you know, his race isn't that important, but I think it's just an interesting character. So again, I said I'm in the middle of these things because on one hand, I'm like, well, it's insulting. I don't want to be a diversity hire. I mean, you know, and people have already gone through this. I mean, Denzel Washington went through this. He was cast in the Pelican Brief opposite Julia Roberts. And apparently, I think it's John Grisham. It's a Grisham film or based on a Grisham novel. And Grisham originally protested Denzel Washington's hiring because he was like, well, I didn't write this for a black man. I wrote it for a white man or whatever. But it's Denzel Washington. And, you know, the movie is fantastic. And it doesn't suffer for it. So I think I take it on a case by case basis. If there's something that can be added to the character, that I can add to the character with my personal history or using a certain aspect of my identity, then I think that's interesting and it can be illuminating for a character. You might be able to rewrite Cyclops' background from a traumatic childhood, from a different angle. But at the same time, with the timing being as it is, and I'm thinking of making a video about this as well, is that I think a lot of the quote unquote woke casting is actually backfiring on actors of color in a negative way, because I think what is going to begin to happen, if it's not happening already, is that as soon as audiences start seeing a dark-skinned face, or they start seeing Roy G. Biv hair, and they start seeing pronouns and bios, then they're immediately going to switch off and say, well, obviously this person got this job because not because they're talented, but because the filmmakers are trying to say something, and they're trying to provoke me in some way. I mean, like I think about what happened with the recent The Sandman with Neil Gaiman and the controversy over the death character. And I'm thinking to myself, I wasn't a fan of the initial backlash, because I'm like, honestly, it shouldn't matter that much. You don't know what they're going to do with like hair and makeup and special effects and to bring that character to life. But at the same time, you understand why people are complaining, because they see this shit happen over and over again to franchises that they love. And it sucks.
Pavlov's dog, in a way.
And if I'm the actress at the center of that, if I'm the black woman hired to play Anne Boleyn, if I'm the black woman hired to play Death, if I'm the black man hired to play Superman, now I have to contend with a public that is already going to be against my casting, just because they think that my casting is being used as a tool to communicate some kind of agenda. It's not about that. That's why I envy guys like Denzel or James Earl Jones or Sam Jackson or Lawrence Fishburne. They were able to come up at a time. I mean, I love Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus. Who would have guessed the guy playing Ike Turner to such great effect would come around and play this character who has great gravitas and can fight and just has all this going on. There's just. But now I feel like it's a big political statement every time you get cast. Or, I never got into, I keep saying I never got into acting to be an activist. I just wanted to play great roles and tell, great stories. And it just happened to be something that I was good at, or am good at. I don't have any other agendas outside of that. But now it seems increasingly like the activism and the advocacy has to take precedence over the art. And I think because of that, it's happening on so many levels that it's going to begin to push audiences away every time they see an actor who isn't white. You know what I mean? That's the fear of the backlash that I see coming. I would like to work. I agree with that. I just want to work on really cool stuff, and and people say like, why can't? If that's the case, if you can play, a Cyclops, then how come, Chris Evans couldn't play Luke Cage? Well, the issue that there's a practice happens in theater. It also happens in the opera as well. It's been happening longer in the opera from what I understand, but it's called colorblind or non-traditional casting, which is what it sounds like. A role is written in a particular way, and then someone of a different race or gender occupies that role. And oftentimes it doesn't work in reverse, because a character like Luke Cage, him being black is central to the given circumstances and the reality of that world. And if you tried to cast white actors in A Raisin in the Sun, it doesn't work, because then the plot line where you have this white neighborhood representative come in and try to pay the black family to not move into their neighborhood, that plot doesn't work anymore. So it's a double standard. And I think a lot of people, a lot of conservative minded people don't really understand why Hamilton is kind of a thing. It's like, well, how all these minorities are playing all these founding fathers. Like, why can't we do the yada, yada, yada?
Yeah, the founding fathers didn't rap. What the hell is this?
Yeah, but it's when you watch it, it's like, it's a cool theatrical novel, interesting way to tell that particular story, but it wouldn't work. You can't tell Amistad with a bunch of white boys.
Yeah. That would be awkward.
People would be like, what are you doing? But
maybe you should try to be a punk rock shocking thing. Like, what? We're gonna have a bunch of gingers do Amistad.
Yeah, that'll be awkward. But but for me, it's just tough, because I've built a career. I built a resume of just a variety of roles. I say that I'm a character actor in a leading man's shell. I can transform, and I have a certain temperament and a certain emotional access and a certain kind of sensibility and approach to my work and a certain aesthetic and a certain appetite for the kind of work that I like to do. And that's been trained into me, and that's grown as I've worked over time. And then I get all these scripts, and it's just, it's script after script, scene after scene about Black victimization, and it's pushing over this it's trying to craft this worldview. I mean, I tweeted about this a few weeks ago. I got this audition for a series regular on I call him a Dick Wolf, one of the Dick Wolf shows. And roll right up my alley. It's a doctor, he's got a strong heart, nice guy. I mean, it just would have been a great role. But then I get to the last page of these scenes that I'm liking, but then there's just this social racial justice kind of narrative that's inserted into the scene. And I often think, how much more prominent, how much more of a name, how much more famous would I be if I were able to just put my principles aside and say, you know what, I'm making this kind of money. I can show up to the set every day and do this garbage that I don't believe in, that's putting forth this worldview that I don't agree with, and that I think is actually not reflective of reality, and that's a straight up lie. I mean, there are certain films that are award-winning films that have been released in the last 5 years or so that garnered all this praise, but they're based on true events, and they're just straight up wrong, but they push a narrative. And it's like, I can't do that. But as a Black actor, sometimes I feel pigeonholed. The story used to be that we were pigeonholed as thugs and criminals or whatever. And that has not been, again, I'm overlooked, but that's not been the experience for me. What's been the experience for me is that I'm pigeonholed now in roles that are an afterthought. There's sort of a diversity. It's like, we just need a Black person. And we're going to hire a Black person for this role, regardless of whatever the cultural background might be, whether or not it fits, it's a good fit or not. And so I feel like a token oftentimes, or I feel like I'm being asked to not be an artist, or even just an actor. I'm being asked to be a proponent of a worldview that I don't share. And that's what's difficult for me, is I feel pigeonholed and tokenized in that way. I'm a mascot for a lot of white progressives, as opposed to an independent artist with talent and a career and training to match and chops to match my lofty talk.
Well, now that leads to a follow-up question, and you mentioned earlier doing some writing and producing. Is the answer then for Clifton Duncan maybe getting on the other side of the board and create? You keep talking about the writing. You keep talking about the writing you're seeing. Even when you see good, you mentioned even seeing good stuff, and then you get to the end and it's agenda, or not necessarily seeing good stuff. Is the answer for Clifton Duncan to be on the other side of this and start to do a lot of writing and creating yourself then?
Yeah, it's not enough to be an actor. You have to actually create, and you have to build things. That's one of the reasons that I'm going back. I'm really trying to get back to the roots of. I mean, I have ideas that have been swimming around forever, but it really has to get back to the roots of, like, what is art? What is the point of art? What is the point of storytelling? What is it about stories? What is it that endures about certain stories and doesn't work in other stories? You go back and read. It's not just Aristotle, but it's the works of Sophocles and Aeschylus and Aristophanes and all the greats from the past. A few hundred years after that, you're talking about your Shakespeares and your George Bernard Shaws and your Ibsens, your Chekhov, one of my favorite writers, or even up to the last century, August Wilson, one of our great playwrights. What is it that makes the work that these people do endure, and why do these people endure? And whatever it is that I end up pursuing, it has to be along those lines, and it has to be something that's worthwhile, and that aims for timelessness as opposed to timeliness. So in whatever capacity I can, I think I'm learning more and more of what the important things are, and that I have to be a producer of some sort in order to, 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 in order to put stuff out there. But then it goes back to what we were saying before, which is that it's difficult to get that. But I feel like we're in an era now where if I were able to build a big enough fan base and following, then there's enough people out there who would say, like, I believe in what you're doing, so I'm going to donate, to your cause and see what you can get done. That's an avenue that didn't really exist in the past, and I think that's worth exploiting as well. But I think at the core of it, it just has to be about what the stories are and what the art is. Art for art's sake. I think that's not a bad thing. I think that we have to kind of return to that and to I think we need more artists to understand that what they do is actually worthwhile, even though the rest of society is telling you that, you need a plan B or that you need to get a real job. I think a lot of people internalize that, and they don't, it's a cultural thing, and that transcends politics and ideology, honestly. And, so the solution is creating better work and making sure that people have access to that work, as many people as possible, so they can share it around and be inspired by it and hopefully pay you to do more of it. Yeah,
and that's the hope. I just tossed your channel in the chat. I should probably toss your socials and everything else in the chat. I really, as somebody who just wants good entertainment and just wants the art that we grew up with, the stuff that we took for granted, I'm definitely interested in what you have to do next, either as an actor or as a producer and writer. And I think that is possible. And I think there's a market for it, financially and emotionally, and if you will, spiritually, or just from whatever point. Because even people who can't necessarily break down or put to words what they feel about a particular movie or film or TV show, ongoing series, or whatever you consider streaming, they can tell when it's good. They can tell when they connect to it, even if they don't know why, or when it's bad. I always bring up my mom, who's been a Queen Latifah fan for 30 years. And when she saw The Equalizer, she said, "This is just terrible." And I'm like, my mom is, I don't want to give her age, but she's a black woman of a certain age. And so she's the market. By getting Queen Latifah, you're trying to get her to watch, and you've put her off, and you don't understand why you've done that.
Yeah. It's just, you can't keep assuming that you're better than the people that you're trying to serve. One of my favorite analogies is a restaurant. You know what I mean? You can't serve nasty ass food, and then when customers complain, be like, "Well, it's because there's something wrong with your taste buds." It's like, no, motherfucker, it's your food.
You got racist taste buds. That's
exactly. Your mouth is racist. Have you considered? Please read this pamphlet on diversity, inclusion, and equity, and fix your palate, you bigot.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing. I think one of the things that I've learned over the past year, I appreciate you giving out my my YouTube in the chat. I've been posting mainly Shakespeare videos, and the response to those has been extraordinarily positive. And that tells me, it's like, no, man, like people want this stuff. If it's done well and it's communicated clearly, they want more of it. And, and they ask, like, well, can you read this poem next? Or what about this one? Oh yeah, I remember when I had to do this back in high school, yada, yada, yada. Like, that was really cool. And, I didn't understand it, but I'm still supporting you. I'll give you a sub. They want to see, I think people out there want to root for people that they want to root for, and they want to support them financially. They want people who aren't going to condescend to them. Yes, Cynthia, this is actually cultural appropriation. Like,
yeah.
We philosophers, that is
what
a fact.
Doing?
Well, here's the thing, because we have people who have established these wonderful elements of culture, and you can absorb what the greats have already done, and you can build on that for your own particular time. Or you could take whatever your own points of view, your own temperament, your own creative abilities, and you can absorb those lessons and maybe create something new. I really feel like I'm in a time where we're in an era where we need to kind of step back a little bit to go forward. And
definitely,
and it's funny because it happens in so many mediums. We were talking about comic books earlier. The only stuff that I read is the old stuff now.
Yeah.
And I watch these
Collections and
movies, and
stuff.
I watch the old movies. I don't watch much of the new stuff. I read these plays. I mean, these old plays, they work. We still perform them hundreds of years later for a reason. It's because they say something about who we are, and they're a reflection of not only the society and culture of that particular time, but of who we are as people. I mean, cultures change and civilizations kind of change, but what motivates people has remained pretty constant for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And we're part of a big human chain. And I think if you forget that in the service of a particular ideology, then your art inevitably will turn people away, because it's not going to resonate and it's going to fail, because people aren't going to be able to see themselves in it. You can tell a story about there's a movie called Gun Hill Road, which is a coming of age story about a young a young man who transitions into a young woman. And it's a coming of age story. There's awkward dates and trying to find a peer group to fit in, but it's a slice of life. And it's like, it's the challenges of puberty times 10.
Yeah.
And that's a compelling story to look at. And people might come away watching something like that and be like, oh, I had no idea about, even if I think it's weird, there's still some elements about the life that I just didn't understand. And like, there's a humanity there, and that's going to do more to win people over than telling them that they're bigots if they don't accept these people. It's like, no, these people are people like everybody else. And you tell the story from that presumption.
That's how people connect. Everyone can connect to awkwardness, or even if it's not that specificness, you're still speaking to something human and something universal.
The universal is the word. Because I had a teacher who once said, and I think about it all the time, that like we hear oftentimes that the personal is political, but I had a teacher who, this brilliant woman named Zelda Fitchandler, may she rest in peace. She said that the more personal something is, the more universal it becomes. Whereas all we hear is that the personal is political. The personal can be political, but the personal is also universal. And, we all have stories about the time that, about times we were jealous with rage, or we had our hearts broken, or, we had to struggle to get, that we all have our struggles and different things in life. And if people are honest about that and they put that forth in their art from a human perspective and express it in a powerful way, then everybody's going to be connected to that in some way. I mean, people are crying at ET. It's an alien. There's something about it. There's something about that story that's going on that's touching people at a deeper level. It's not just about this weird brown thing on screen whose fingers light up. It's deeper than that.
And I talked about crying at Terminator, even as an adult. It's one thing to get me when I'm younger. When I was an adult and then re-saw it, I'm like, man, that just still hits, and it's something about, like you said, humanity really hasn't. I mean, we've changed, but we really haven't changed in thousands of years. The cultural elements change, but the basic things that run humans and the basic things that motivate us are still the same. Real quick, just shout out to Dope Stilo, who it's this great show. I appreciate everybody in chat. He just wanted to know he had to go, and we appreciate you. But you know what? Is there any? This has been an incredible conversation. I really appreciate your insight on a lot of things, and like your understanding. And I hope everyone listening kind of got the way you think about art is something that maybe, and thinking about acting and thinking about the craft and thinking about the elements of storytelling. I appreciate that insight, because as I would consider myself a layperson when it comes to film, just somebody who watches movies and like them. It really kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, educates, not necessarily indoctrinates, but educates us on like what should be happening and what the actual intentions of an actor or of a story are. And I hope that, I'm not even going to say Hollywood, because I honestly don't necessarily have the most of hope for Hollywood to change. If economics aren't their end game, then I think it has to be an independent thing if it is to happen. But I really hope the best for your career, not just, because you're a good person, but because we need people who think that way to be making art and to be for the culture, for, not, that's kind of a catchphrase, but for the culture of humans, for the culture of Americana or humanity in general. We need good stuff. We need good stuff to watch. We cannot just keep getting these pamphlets, because it's not even people are still getting mad, but it's just the same. Something has to advance. And you brought up a story about a trans character, and if stories were more about universal concepts, I think a lot of what they purport to be accomplished, talking about the SJW left or however you want to turn them, would actually be accomplished. So thank you for coming on the stream. I appreciate your insight. But is any thoughts on that? Anything else that you want to say or plug or talk about before we get out of here in a little bit?
Not much, but I do think that look, we can look at Russia, and they had all these great composers, novelists, musicians, writers, playwrights, I should say, that came out of there. We look at France and Italy, their painters, their playwrights. We look at the Greeks, their works on philosophy and social organization, various aspects of life and art. What kind of art is American culture producing? That's what it boils down to. There was a time where, our Hollywood industry was like second to none, and, the cinematography and the stories, and, that's why it is as big as it is today. Jazz music, or, even, people have issues with this, but the way that hip hop culture has taken over the world, what is our, but even then, people say the golden age of hip hop was like what, the 90s, maybe the early 2000s at the latest was over. So, since then, what kind of cultural artifacts are we going to leave behind? Are our best artistic days behind us? And I think as an American society, what are we going to look to? What are we going to produce that's going to outlive us? And right now, I don't know what that's going to be. There was a point in the mid 20th century up to, I think, maybe, just the late 20th century, where we were producing great plays, great music, great films. But, what are we doing right now? Are we going to look to influencers and TikTokers for our great, and maybe I'm thinking about it and too square and too old fashioned, but I think that the broader point is what our culture is, and what our cultural priorities are. And I think that a culture that is not healthy, I think if the art of a culture isn't healthy, Most Def said this at Black on Both Sides. He's like, you want to know how hip hop is doing? Ask how the people are doing. Well, look at the art that we're producing. I think it's a reflection of how the people are doing and how the society is doing. And I think a lot of people feel that there's something missing. And I think that that's a reflection of what's missing in us as a culture and society right now. I know it's a very broad statement, but that's sort of where I'm getting at. So the important thing is to try to, for me, maybe to be an ambassador, to try to get more people in and just recognize the importance of art. A lot of great art has always been underground, to be honest, but now we have access to it because of the internet. So maybe that's what the next step is.
I think it is.
I can go about this forever. As you might imagine. I know we got to go.
And I appreciate it. I really didn't do it. And now I got to kind of add on. You talk about hip hop. So, like, I remember in high school, and it sucks I'm actually from Detroit, and I didn't listen to enough of his music when he was alive. But I remember when Jay Dilla and Madlib were doing music, and crunk was the big thing, and I hated it because I'm not like a club guy. But like Jay Dilla, Madlib, and MF Doom were like my holy trinity of hip hop.
Jay Dilla is one of the best producers who has ever lived.
Yes,
bar none. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually just recently bought one of the samplers that he made famous, the SP303, and I don't know how to use it yet, but I got to learn. But gotta learn. I want to learn. But like that technically all happened outside of the quote unquote Golden Age. So the piggyback off this point, shout out to Danny Brown, also a Detroit rapper. But great art went underground, and it took years for a lot of that stuff to be appreciated. You know, at the time, most people heard of Jay Dilla after he passed. I remember when he was JD still, and he changed his name because he didn't want to confuse with Jermaine Dupri. Like right after he left Slum Village and Welcome to Detroit, and that came out late 90s and stuff, and everyone hated him because of Tribe Called Quest. I remember that era live and stuff like that. But like those type of artists, even if it took a while, you brought up some artists get more acclaim, you know, some get it while they're alive, some afterwards. But like the art to me will last. Maybe we don't know what the best movie of 2020 and 2021 was, because maybe we won't hear about it until a few years. Like, oh, it was this great thing that gets a cult-like following years after the fact. But I feel like art will survive because humans can't help but to try. There's going to be someone who's going to make a movie or a song or a painting or something that moves people, because there's always someone who needs to make that to you know, make art for his art's sake and express it, and then eventually you know, the cream will rise to the to the top, so to speak. So that's at least my optimism about where that and it may not come from the corporate system of Hollywood. I think underground has to become bigger, and I think with YouTube, I mean, TikTok as it currently is just a bunch of girls twerking or whatever. But like, if someone can make that into an art form, maybe there is some great art to be had on TikTok, and it just hasn't happened yet, or it has and I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, you know, I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I mean, I think about music especially. There's so many cool people doing so many cool things, and we have access to that because of the internet. So yeah, I'm sure there are also brilliant people around the world that are doing things, and but now they have more access to it. So I think it's about creating access and you know, and building it for more people. And I think the opportunity now is for, you know, artists who do. I mean, I would even some years ago, I had friends complain about, you know, well, I lost out to this role that I tested for because they gave it to somebody with 2 million Twitter followers. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you actually have talent and ability. You could be that person. But, you know, I had an ex-girlfriend say, I don't want to get famous like that. And turns out she won't be getting famous for doing anything at this point. But it just, you can't overlook this powerful tool that we have. And it happens to everybody. It happens to everybody sentient.
We all get out, yeah.
It's going to happen to you too, friend. So, you know, there are people doing great things out there, and you can't discount that at all. And thank God we have the internet, because we have access to these brilliant, talented people. And now we have avenues. One of the things that I think is the coolest, that we have avenues to pay these people now, you know, for the cost of a cup of coffee, we can say, like, I support what you do, and here you go. So I tip that up to you so you can do your spilling, my friend.
Yeah, actually, I want to speak in which to you, because somebody, I think it was the Wake Down, said make sure you, because people want to give you money, people want to compensate you for what you already done. It says make sure you learn to set up stream elements.
Yeah, I saw that comment. I gotta learn how to do that. I gotta look that up.
Yeah, I did. There's a video that I found that taught me. One thing that's the huge thing that people forget: you have to make stream elements one of your mods, and that allows us why this bot shows up and is able to post stuff, because it's an automated thing that is a mod. But yeah, if you want to learn, I'll definitely teach you, because I think, you know, people do want to compensate this. People, so Ron Martin says 20 years from now, did you see the legendary Vigilante Williamson and Clifton Duncan stream? Legendary, yeah, maybe this is one of those streams that goes viral later, or who knows. But that's people do want to support you, because people, again, there's a yearning for this stuff. There's a yearning for good entertainment.
This one person, Newbomb Turk, says I found more bands and artists through YouTube than I had ever heard through the radio. And I think that's what I haven't owned a TV in over a decade, and I mean, I stick to the internet, and I find so many interesting people. And you know, I think one of the cool things about now is that you don't. The whole model of, like, we have these stars that are kind of, you know, cordoned off from society, and they're kind of lead these mysterious lives, and they're fantastic people. I mean, that's kind of over now. Now we got people that are posting, you know, random Instagram live videos, or they're telling you about them. We have unprecedented access now, and rather than use that access to bash the people who would be your customers, so to speak. Maybe invite them in and just put out great work, and don't treat them like jerks.
Yeah, and another comment from the Wild Turk. Hell, he's one of the modulantes, so to speak. He says he listened to a Japanese band that had been around since '93. Had no idea. They're called, I'm probably mispronouncing this, Ninjinisu, metal band. So like that's what I mean. Like maybe the great art is, there's going to be something. I always find good art years after the fact. This came out in 2016. It was good. And 2016, I didn't know it existed.
Well, I think also two things. One, just talking about Japanese music, there was a point, my last girlfriend was Japanese American. And at one point I went down this rabbit hole where I just started listening to like just 80s R&B from Japan. I was like, yo, this shit is dope.
I'm like, in that rabbit hole. Shout out to, what's the channel? New J something. There's some channel that I'm always looking at, has like this New J channel. It's like this part of that's trying to sample stuff, but part of it's just listen to it's really good music. Like 70s, 80s, Japanese.
There's so much great stuff. But the second thing I was going to say is that what I find that's really encouraging actually is when I go to older videos, it could be a Bee Gees video or something, some old Motown stuff. And you scroll down to the comments and you will see people who are like, I'm 13 years old, I'm 14, I'm 15. And I wish our music today sounded as good as this. And my point in that is that people know good stuff when they hear it. It doesn't matter. And the thing about music, especially, or art, especially, I said, but music in particular, is that you don't have to have some kind of, Ivy League degree to understand it. You either it's good to you and it moves you, or it doesn't. And it doesn't matter how old or young you are. You know when something is good when you hear it. And I think we need to kind of focus on doing the good stuff and finding more of that. And hopefully maybe the big hope is that in time the money will shift to where we have a bunch of independent artists who are stealing money away from these bigger studios and the big system, and those dollars will be coming my way. They'll be going to Zuby's way. They'll be going to to Tim Pool's way, instead of going into this box office system. It's going to people who are creating stuff that people want. It's going to EVS or your boy Zach or all the other crowdfunding people, as opposed to this system that kind of it hates them.
and has created his own alternative system outside of, yes, you have given me underground rap recommendations. Shout out to a lot of stuff you recommended, but man, this has been a really, really great show. I really appreciate your patience and being here the entire time. It actually a little longer than we normally go, so I thank you for being here. Anything you want to plug? I know I asked you that earlier, and I put your channel. Please subscribe to Clifton's channel and follow him on Twitter if you're not already. Obviously, you're going to be on Friday Night Tights this week, right?
No, I wasn't able to get off work, unfortunately, but hopefully, I know. I hate it, man, because I love being with those guys. They're really great. But that was the plan this week. But, we gotta postpone it. I gotta do the job thing. But hopefully, if people follow me, they subscribe, and I'll get my act together. My life is stabilizing out a little bit as we speak, so I'm getting a little things are straightening out for me, so I can begin to collect those super chats and get that Patreon money, so I can start doing great projects. And I really want to get back to singing, especially, and just because I really do think that it's a cool sort of thing that we have now, where we can speak directly to people, and people will say like, hey man, I'll give you a few bucks just because I appreciate what you're doing. And if you could do that on a massive scale, you might not get, you might not be a millionaire, but at least I can say, you know what, there's something that I do. Like I say all the time, some people learn how to build houses. I learn how to build characters. That's my job. And that's, and I would love to be paid to just do that. I don't want to have to like pontificate on the matters of today in society. I enjoy doing it, but I would rather just be able to act and act and sing and make good money off of that, know, and just have it be an honest transaction where people say like, hey man, I like what you do, so here's some money. I'd be like, thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll just keep doing it. And that's all it really has to be.
I would say do more. Do more live streams. Brightest Day, who's a smaller channel, who's I've helped me. He says, "How many watch hours do you need?" I mean, like, there's people in this audience who will like. Why? All right, then you heard them. Go to Clifton Duncan's channel. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe and watch his videos. Watch them all. Rewatch them 100 times, so you can get your watch hours. And doing live streams is a good way to build up watch hours. I mean, I'm still building up subs, but I think I'm pretty close with watch hours just because of talking crap in front of these wonderful people who've sent me super chats and have funded this. People do want to support you, and I mean that's the dream, is to just be a which you've done on a wide scale, but being a professional creator full time is that's something that I think for you, you're a very talented and well thought guy. I think that will happen soon. And so yeah, that's we'll get what's Clifton need. We'll get him there. We will get you there, and you'll get you there because you have a lot to say.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't want to. What I need is to be disciplined enough to continue to put out content on a regular basis that people will watch and engage with. That's what I need to do. And then we'll talk about everything else after that. But I can't ask for something not putting out while putting out nothing. I have some great videos up right now, but obviously the goal is to do more and to expand on what I'm doing in some really exciting ways. But I need money to do that. But it's always a catch-22.
Yeah. You will, man. You will. So we will get you there. We have a couple new subs, New Wild Turk.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I
appreciate
it. Thank you guys for subbing. Check it out. I am going to check it out because I think that's, even as somebody who's not as well read on Shakespeare and a lot of classical stuff, I am very interested in seeing your takes on it. And so yeah, I thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your insight. And again, thank you everybody in the chat. Yeah, regular, consistent content. It is a challenge. And yeah, once the channel has subs, the community can and will take care of the watch hours if the word is put out. So please put the word out. Please like and share and subscribe, not just for my own selfish purposes to grow this channel, but for Clifton, because we got to get, if we want good art, if we want it, we can only complain about The Last Jedi so much without supporting good artists and supporting creatives. So we have to support. And Wake Down would have subbed, but he already was. Sub second account.
Well, thank you, Wake Down. I appreciate it.
So yeah. So for the Wake Down, for Brightest Day, New Bomb Turk, Sentient Dildo, Islington Girl, Ron Martin, Rough Girl, Rough Girl, Draco Argentis, and Gomer Kyle, and Ogre Squasher 101, Comics Division, and anyone else in the chat, please blame my head, not my heart. I really appreciate everybody for being here, and for Matt, who had to leave a little early at Foulball Productions. Please check out his channel, obviously. Sub, because if you like this greatness, it will be next week on Matt's channel, and I think we do have a guest lined up for next week as well. Thank you again, Clifton. I'm going to actually play the alternate outro for the Wake Down. It actually has a similar point about any girl being able to just, put a camera up her ass and become a superstar. And so thank you all for watching. We will see you next week. Peace.
This is Culture Crime Fighters. We are a Culture Crimes Task Force so powerful, so far-reaching, not even the most dastardly of villains can escape. Our goal is to identify and defeat all culture criminals wherever they lurk and destroy them. For too long have these cretins carried out their nefarious deeds, and we will sit for it no longer. Beware, you may commit your culture crimes, but if you do, justice will be served at the hands of the Culture Crime Fighters.
What are you?
I'm Vigilante Williamson.
You went full.
SJW.
Never go full.
SJW.
You don't buy that?
President of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy.
You guys are nuts. That's one of my pet peeves, and here you come along with a third pronunciation. Like, what are you doing? Actually, it's pronounced
Stupid bitch.
If you could just be like 25% less brave, that would be great. People were like, there's no way he fucked her. This pig, he didn't fuck this pig.
I think he probably did. I think he didn't give a fuck. Allegedly.
That's just your opinion. It's in England, they say
Audible cunt.
And in America, we say Amber Heard. And that's where the confusion is.
See, I was going with the British way.
Turns out it's a little more nuanced than that.
And I mean, hey, we're in 2021. Any moderately attractive girl can do squats for a few months and put a camera up her ass and become and go viral. So
I don't know. I mean, I'll keep my mind open. I spent all day yesterday on that video. I edited, I cut, I put sound effects and visuals. I'm tap dancing, I'm spinning plates. Although for the life of me, I can't grow it. It's got like 45 fucking views.
You know what I think it is now? Tease the algorithmic guys. Brightest Day is in the chat. His channel's growing because of those shorts. Yeah, that's how it goes.
That's how it is.
Man, this has been a fun ride. I thank everybody for being here the whole time. I mean, there's regulars, obviously, Snorter Poopist, the Islington Girl, Man of War 665, Neighbor of the Beast, Just Another Red Shirt. Not just another red shirt. He's the red shirt, the crew. I love you all, man.
You guys are the shit. Love you all. Man of War 665, Lord Thoth, Just Another Red Shirt, Darius Munchausen, 24/7 Fusion Media, Ascension Dildo, Mark D with a C, Snorter Poopus, Android Scanner, the Islington Girl, New Bomb Turk. Everybody, you guys are great. We'll see you all next time. Have a great night.
Peace.
Yeah, peace.